I was working late when the TV switched to a financial news segment. I was about to ignore it until my eyes locked onto a lighthouse-shaped pin on a female CFO's blazer. My heart nearly stopped. I opened my desk drawer and took out an identical pin. I had only ever made two. For my daughter, the child who went missing 20 years ago. I said nothing. I simply scheduled a meeting with her. But when she handed me the documents, her sleeve slipped back, and what I saw on her wrist made everything fall apart. This story won't leave you unchanged. Before we begin, I'd love to hear from you. Drop a comment and tell me how you're feeling right now in just one word. Your presence here truly matters to me. A quick note: some details have been fictionalized for storytelling and reflection. What matters most is the message this story carries. I stopped breathing the moment I saw the badge on her lapel. 20 years of searching compressed into 3 seconds of cable news. The financial reporter was interviewing someone about mergers, the kind of segment I usually ignore while working late. But something made me look up. A woman in a navy suit mid-answer about corporate valuations, and there on her lapel a small metal badge with an engraved lighthouse, identical to the one in my desk drawer. That morning had started the way every morning starts. 5:30. Houston home office. Disciplined routine, because discipline is what keeps you functional when hope has expired. I am Leland Garrett, 60 years old, founder of a security consulting firm that has protected corporate assets for 3 decades while failing to protect my own family. I opened the desk drawer. Third one down, left side. The badge sat in a velvet box, hand-engraved metal no bigger than a silver dollar. I had commissioned it in 2004 from a craftsman in Houston's museum district. A lighthouse because my daughter said it meant finding your way home. I gave it to her for her 7th birthday in 2005. 3 months later, she disappeared. I held it that morning like I had every morning for 20 years. The engraving showed a lighthouse with waves at its base and her initials along the bottom curve. The craftsman had made only 2, one for her, one for me. My phone buzzed. Text from my adopted son, Orion Ashford, 32, Chief Operating Officer of my company. Dad, you need to sign the authorization before the meeting. I've prepared the documents. I looked at the message and didn't reply, something I had started doing more often lately. Orion wanted authority to proceed with corporate decisions without my review. He called it efficiency. I called it erosion. I placed the badge back in its box and closed the drawer. Another day of teaching corporations how to find vulnerabilities while ignoring the ones in my own life. But that was morning. Evening was different. I was still at the desk at 8:45 that night, working through partnership contracts with the television on low, financial news, market summaries, white noise. Then I heard the reporter say a name. Margot Gallagher, CFO of Meridian Financial, thank you for joining us tonight. I glanced up. On the screen, a woman answered questions about a major acquisition. 27, maybe 28. Sharp features, the kind of precision in her speech that comes from trusting numbers more than people. She wore a navy suit, and on her lapel, the badge. I grabbed the remote, rewound the segment, played it again, paused it. The image froze with her mid-gesture, and the badge caught the studio lights. I fumbled for my phone, zoomed the camera on the television screen. The craftsman's tiny maker's mark was visible, a stylized hammer in the bottom right corner. The lighthouse, the waves, the position on her lapel, same place my daughter used to pin hers. Not similar, identical. How many mornings had I held that badge and told myself the search was over? That 20 years meant she was gone, that hope was the enemy of acceptance. How many reports from private investigators had I read that led nowhere? How many times had I opened that drawer and chosen discipline over desperation? I rewound the segment 3 times, my hand shaking. There had not been many of those badges made. The craftsman specialized in custom metalwork one-off commissions. I had paid him to make exactly two. Mine was in my drawer. The other should have been lost to whatever had taken my daughter, but here it was, on cable news. On the lapel of Margot Gallagher, CFO of Meridian Financial. I opened my laptop and searched for Meridian Financial's corporate information. New York headquarters. Founded 2018. Specialized in analyzing partnership agreements and corporate structure optimization. Recent expansion into security consulting integration. Security consulting. I pulled up my own company files. Partnership contracts, strategic relationships. The name appeared immediately. Meridian Financial had been Garrett Security Consulting's largest strategic partner for 2 years. Quarterly review meetings, joint client presentations, shared revenue agreements. The contract header on my screen read, Garrett Security Consulting / Meridian Financial, Q 3/2024 Strategic Partnership Review. I had signed those contracts. Orion had attended the quarterly meetings as my representative. He had sat across conference tables from her. I had approved meeting minutes that included her name. For 2 years, I had been in business with the company that employed the woman wearing my daughter's badge. I am 60 years old, and I have spent 30 years teaching corporations how to detect the invisible, how to find the security flaw no one else sees, the vulnerability hidden in plain architecture. And I had been sitting across conference tables from my daughter without knowing it. I opened my desk drawer and took out my badge, placed it next to the laptop screen showing her frozen image. 20 years between 2 pieces of engraved metal, the same lighthouse, the same waves, the same craftsman's mark. The contract files showed our next joint meeting scheduled for 3 weeks from now. November. A routine security assessment at their Manhattan headquarters. I had attended some of these meetings in person, though usually I sent my team. This time would be different. This time I would go myself. I would stand in the same room with the woman wearing my daughter's badge. I would see if 20 years could be crossed by a piece of engraved metal and a father who had finally stopped trusting silence. But first I needed to understand why my private investigator, the one I had paid for 2 decades to search, had never mentioned Meridian Financial, had never flagged the connection, had never found what cable news had just handed me in 3 seconds. I closed the laptop without calling him. For the first time in 20 years of weekly reports and monthly retainers, I did not reach for the phone. Because if he had missed this, I needed to know why. And if he had not missed it, I needed to know that even more. My hand hovered over Donovan Chambers' number for 30 seconds before I realized I wasn't going to call him, not this time, maybe not ever again. 3 days had passed since I saw the badge on television. 3 days of pretending to work while my mind ran calculations about what I knew and what I should have known. The meeting in Manhattan was scheduled booked through official channels like any routine security assessment. But before I walked into that room, I needed to understand why my private investigator had never mentioned Meridian Financial in 20 years of monthly reports. I pulled out the file boxes. 20 years of summaries neatly typed, consistently formatted. Donovan Chambers, private investigator, had been filing reports since 2005. I had read every one, or thought I had. I started with year 5. Page 3 showed a crossed-out file reference number in the margin INV-2010-447-M. I didn't remember making that edit. Page 7 had another. Page 12 another. Small marks easy to miss when you're reading for content, instead of questioning the document itself. I opened my laptop and searched our corporate partnership database. Meridian Financial founded 2018. Our strategic partnership began in 2022. 2 years of quarterly meetings, shared client presentations, joint security assessments. 2 years of a woman wearing my daughter's badge working 20 floors above street level while Donovan filed reports about dead ends in California and Oregon. How many times had I trusted his reports without verification? How many times had I accepted his negative results as truth, believed his careful explanations for why leads went nowhere? Paid his invoices without questioning why 2 decades of searching had produced nothing but crossed-out file numbers and professional sympathy. I typed an email to Meridian's scheduling coordinator. Scheduling Q4 security assessment as per contract. I will conduct the review personally this quarter. Donovan would ask why I was going myself. I would tell him it was routine. He would believe me because I had spent 20 years being predictable. I didn't call him. I closed the file boxes and put them back on the shelf. For the first time in 2 decades, I would let a week pass without his voice on the other end of the line. The Manhattan office sat on the 18th floor of a glass tower 3 blocks from Central Park. Professional lobby efficient receptionist, the kind of corporate environment that runs on calendars and access codes. A young assistant led me to the conference room where Margot Gallagher sat reviewing contract documents. She was younger in person than on television. 27 I knew from the research I had done in silence over the past week. She stood when I entered, shook my hand with the kind of firm grip that comes from working in rooms full of men who test every gesture. "Mr. Garrett," she said. "Your team's assessment last quarter flagged 3 access points. Have those been addressed?" The badge was there. Navy suit left lapel same position. The lighthouse caught the fluorescent light. "They have," I said. "But I wanted to review your new acquisition protocols personally. When companies merge, security gaps multiply." She nodded and pulled up a presentation on the screen. "I appreciate thoroughness. Most consultants send junior staff and bill senior rates." She didn't know she was talking to the founder. To her, I was just another contractor hired to find vulnerabilities. I let her believe it. We talked for 90 minutes. She asked precise questions about access logs, authentication protocols, physical security integration with digital systems. The kind of analytical mind that questions every assumption, tests every claim, trusts numbers over assurances. I watched her think through problems the way I had taught myself to think systematically, carefully, assuming nothing. She moved through the presentation with practiced efficiency, clicked to the next slide, gestured toward the data points, explained the merger timeline and the security concerns that came with absorbing another company's infrastructure. "The acquisition closes in 6 weeks," she said. "We need the vulnerability assessment complete before then." "I can have preliminary findings to you in 2 weeks," I replied. She made a note on her tablet. Professional, focused, no indication that the badge on her lapel meant anything beyond decoration. We finished the meeting. She stood and reached across the conference table to hand me the updated access logs. Her sleeve pulled back. Inside right wrist, a pale crescent-shaped birthmark. 20 years is 7,300 days of carrying a badge in a drawer and believing you will never see its match again. It is 2 decades of reading medical files and memorizing distinguishing features until they burn into your memory like photographs you can't stop developing. The birthmark was documented in her file from 2004. Dr. Morrison had noted it as a distinguishing feature during her 4-year checkup. Crescent-shaped, inside right wrist. Same size, same position, same distinctive curve. I took the access logs from her hand, without letting my expression change. "Thank you for coming personally, Mr. Garrett," she said. "It's rare to meet the actual founder." "I like to stay involved," I said. I walked to the elevator with a steady pace, pressed the button, waited. Rode down 18 floors while my pulse hammered against the professional mask I had spent 30 years perfecting. In the parking garage, I sat in my car for 20 minutes before my hands stopped shaking enough to turn the key. I drove back to Houston that evening, seeing nothing but the pale crescent on her wrist, the badge on her lapel, and the calendar showing 3 days until my monthly check-in with Donovan. For the first time in 20 years, I would not be making that call. Instead, I would be calling someone I hadn't spoken to in 7 years. Morris Cobb, a former investigator in Montana, who had taught me that the most dangerous place to hide a lie is inside a routine you never question. At 2 in the morning, surrounded by 20 years of reports I had trusted without question, I finally understood the difference between investigating and reading what someone wanted me to see. The kitchen table disappeared under 240 monthly reports. I had pulled every file Donovan Chambers had sent since 2005, arranged them chronologically, and started reading with the kind of attention I should have paid 2 decades ago. The pattern emerged within the first hour. Donovan never reported negative results, not once in 20 years. He never wrote, "Checked this lead and found nothing," or searched Oregon foster records with no match, or interviewed witness who had no relevant information. Every report described leads that required more time, investigations that needed continuation, promising directions that somehow never produced results but always justified another month of billing. 240 reports without a single closed door. I cross-referenced against my own corporate files. In 2022, when Meridian Financial became our strategic partner, I had mentioned it to Donovan during our monthly call. I remembered the conversation. I had been excited about the partnership, described the contract terms, mentioned the CFO by name. He had said, "I'll make a note," in that careful voice he used when logging information. I searched his reports from 2022 forward. 24 months of summaries. Not one mention of Meridian Financial. Not one reference to a CFO named Margot Gallagher working 20 floors above Manhattan street level wearing my daughter's badge. The crossed-out file numbers appeared in years 8, 12, and 17. Always in the margins of pages listing external agency contacts, FBI field offices, state foster systems, missing persons databases. Small edits that looked like clerical corrections, but followed a pattern too consistent to be random. What kind of investigator runs a case for 20 years and never once reports checking a dead end? What kind of professional never says, "I looked here and found nothing," never closes a single line of inquiry, never definitively rules out a possibility? Either the worst investigator I could have hired, or someone who wasn't investigating at all. I had told him about the partnership. He had made a note. And then he had filed 2 years of reports without mentioning that my daughter might be working for a company I met with quarterly. At 6 in the morning, I drafted a text to Morris Cobb. Morris Cobb, 65, retired FBI special agent living in Montana. Isolation had been my colleague before I left the bureau to start my security consulting firm. We had worked financial crimes together, learned the same interrogation techniques, developed the same instinct for when someone was managing information instead of sharing it. He had retired 7 years ago after his wife died, moved to a cabin outside Kalispell, and stopped returning most calls. I typed carefully. Morris, need to meet. Montana. This week, if possible. Not over phone. I stared at the message for 5 minutes before adding -Leland. I sent it. Expected nothing. Morris had isolated himself deliberately, and I had respected that distance for 7 years. He responded in 20 minutes. Is this about your daughter? I sat holding the phone, reading those 5 words over and over. 7 years of silence, and he remembered. Remembered enough to understand that if I was breaking protocol to contact him, it could only be about the one case I had never been able to close. I typed yes, and the person I hired to find her. The response came faster this time. The Thursday 3 p.m. Don't call your PI. Don't change your routine with him. A second message followed with GPS coordinates for what I assumed was his cabin. Then a third. If he's been lying for 20 years, he's either very good or very scared. Either way, he's watching for changes. I had built a career teaching executives to detect deception in their organizations, and I had been paying someone to deceive me for 2 decades. But Morris understood something I was only beginning to process. 20 years of systematic deception required either extraordinary skill or extraordinary fear, and both made people dangerous. The monthly check-in with Donovan was scheduled for Friday. I had planned to skip it, let silence signal that something had shifted. Morris's message made it clear that would be a mistake. If Donovan was watching, and someone who had managed information this carefully for this long would be watching, any deviation from pattern would alert him. I would have to make the call. Would have to ask the same routine questions I had asked for 240 consecutive months. Would have to sound exactly like a father who had accepted that his daughter was gone, and the search was a formality we maintained out of habit rather than hope. I opened a new folder on my laptop and began assembling the evidence file. Photograph of Margot from the television interview badge visible on her lapel. Screenshot of the birthmark from my phone camera zoomed and enhanced. Copy of her medical records from 2004 showing the same crescent-shaped mark, documented by her pediatrician. Timeline of Meridian Financial's partnership with our company. Pages from Donovan's reports with crossed-out file numbers circled in red. Thursday was 2 days away. I booked a flight to Kalispell for Wednesday evening, giving myself time to drive to Morris's coordinates before the meeting. Packed the evidence file in my briefcase alongside routine client documents in case Orion asked where I was going. The hardest investigation I had ever conducted would not be gathering evidence. It would be pretending I hadn't found any. I rehearsed the Friday call in my head. Casual tone. Routine questions about any updates, same questions I always asked, knowing he would say the same things he always said. I would sound tired, but not suspicious. Resigned, but not hostile, exactly like a man who had been funding a search for 20 years, because stopping felt like giving up, even though continuing felt like denial. 2 days until Montana. 3 days until the call where I would lie to the man who had been lying to me since my daughter disappeared. I cleared the reports off the kitchen table and filed them back in their boxes. Every page returned to its exact position. Every folder aligned precisely. If Donovan was good enough to deceive me for 20 years, he was good enough to notice if something looked disturbed. Discipline. Routine. The mask I had worn so long it had started to feel like my actual face. Orion walked into my office at 7:30 Wednesday morning, without knocking, carrying a leather portfolio that I knew contained the authorization documents he'd been pushing for 3 weeks. I had spent the night rehearsing the Friday call to Donovan, practicing casual tone routine questions, the exact cadence of resignation I had perfected over 2 decades. Now my adopted son stood in the doorway, and I had to deliver the same performance a different way. "Morning," he said. "I know you're busy, but the board meets Friday and they need this signed." He set the portfolio on my desk and opened it. Management Transition Authorization, 12 pages of legal language about succession planning and operational continuity. Standard corporate governance documentation that any 60-year-old founder should sign without hesitation. I read it carefully. Page 3 covered decision-making protocols. Page 5 outlined reporting structures. Page 7 contained Article 9.3 buried in a paragraph about external relationship management. The language was precise. Authorized person may negotiate share agreements with external parties, provided such negotiations do not exceed standard market valuations and are disclosed to the board within 90 days of execution. 90 days. 3 months to sell voting control before anyone could stop him. Not after board approval, after execution. It's standard transition language, Dad, Orion said. The board just wants documentation before your birthday next month. I looked up at him. 32 years old. I had taught him corporate structure decision hierarchies, how to read contracts for the clauses that mattered more than the ones that filled pages. If he thought I would miss Article 9.3, he had underestimated me, or overestimated how much attention I had been paying lately. I'll have Unity Rawlings review it, I said. Give me until next week. His jaw tightened. Just slightly. Just enough. The board meets Friday, he said. They're expecting this. Then they'll have to expect it next week instead. How do you maintain normal conversation with someone who is maneuvering to take everything while sitting across the desk you taught him to respect? How do you look at someone you raised for 20 years and see a stranger calculating how much pressure to apply before you notice the grip? He studied me, something new in his expression, a tension I hadn't seen before. You seem different this week, he said. Everything all right. I kept my voice level. Same tone I had used for 20 years of father-son conversations about business strategy and quarterly performance. Just the quarterly assessments, I said. Meridian wants additional penetration testing. His eyes moved to the papers on my desk. The Montana flight confirmation sat face down, boarding pass details hidden, just another document in the usual clutter. His gaze lingered there, then returned to my face. Calculating. Measuring. When do you leave? He asked. This afternoon. Back tomorrow night. He nodded, picked up the portfolio, paused at the door. Next week then, he said. After he left, I sat motionless for 5 minutes. Then I called Unity Rawlings and told her I needed an independent legal review of succession documents. No rush. No need to mention it to anyone else on the board yet. She agreed without asking why. The flight to Kalispell left at 3. I made it with 20 minutes to spare. Morris's cabin sat at the end of a dirt road that turned to mud in spring and dust in summer. October meant dust. The lake beyond the trees reflected afternoon sun like hammered metal. I parked next to a truck that looked older than my investigation files. He met me at the door. Hadn't changed much in 7 years. Same weathered face, same economy of movement. We shook hands and he led me to a rough wooden table inside. I spread the evidence across the surface. Photograph of Margot from the television screen badge visible on her lapel. My badge from the drawer placed next to the photo for comparison. Medical documentation from 2004 showing the crescent-shaped birthmark on her wrist. Screenshot from my phone camera showing the same mark in the same position 2 decades later. Timeline of Meridian Financial's partnership with our company. Pages from Donovan's reports with crossed-out file reference numbers circled in red. Morris reviewed everything methodically. Picked up my badge, studied the craftsman's mark. Examined the medical documentation. Asked clarifying questions about dates and verification. The badge, you're certain you only commissioned 2? From a Houston craftsman, I said. Small operation. I verified yesterday. He closed shop in 2009, only made 12 total of that design. And the birthmark position matches the medical photo exactly. It wasn't a question. He was confirming what the evidence already showed. He set down the medical file and picked up the pages from Donovan's reports. Read them slowly. Set them down. Looked at me. Think carefully, he said. In 20 years of reports from Donovan, did he ever write that he checked a specific lead and found nothing? Not that a lead went nowhere after investigation, but that he looked somewhere specific and reported negative results. I thought back through 240 monthly summaries. Reports about promising directions that needed more time. Investigations requiring continuation. Leads that somehow never produced results, but always justified another month of billing. No, I said. He reported leads that needed more time, leads under investigation, but never a definitive negative result. The difference between 20 years of bad luck and 20 years of systematic deception is a single question I never thought to ask. Morris nodded. That's not investigation. That's information control. Professional investigator always documents dead ends to show thoroughness. You report what you found and what you didn't find. Negative results prove you did the work. Only someone hiding information omits them. He stood, walked to the cabin window overlooking the lake, spoke without turning around. Give me 1 week. Don't call Donovan except for your routine check-in Friday. Don't sign anything Orion gives you. Don't change a single pattern in your life. He turned back, and I saw something in his expression I remembered from 15 years of working federal cases together. The look of someone who had just seen the shape of something much larger than the evidence on the table. 1 week, he said. Then we'll know what we're really dealing with. While I flew back from Montana believing I controlled the investigation's pace, 3 things happened that same week that I wouldn't learn about until much later, each one pulling the truth closer to the surface. I made the Friday call to Donovan. Routine questions, same tired tone I had perfected over 2 decades. He answered with the same careful summaries about leads requiring more time. Neither of us acknowledged that anything had changed. The performance was flawless on both sides. But that Thursday evening, while Morris and I had been spreading evidence across his cabin table in Montana, Margot Gallagher sat in her New York apartment reviewing medical records for an insurance update. She would tell me later about the moment she noticed it. The insurance form asked for family medical history, blood type. She checked her records AB positive. She remembered her mother mentioning she and her father were both type O. It took her a moment to realize the biological impossibility. 2 type O parents cannot produce an AB positive child. Basic genetics she had learned in high school and forgotten until a routine form made her remember. She called her adoptive parents that evening. Her mother answered. Margot asked the question casually, at first thinking there must be a simple explanation. Maybe she had misremembered their blood types. 5 seconds of silence on the other end of the line. Then her adoptive father's voice, having taken the phone from his wife. Margaret. He said they called her Margaret, the name they had given her when the adoption was finalized. We need to tell you something, but not over the phone. Can you trust us until we visit next month? She trusted them. She agreed to wait. But the question had been planted, and it grew in the silence that followed. The next evening, Friday, the same day I made my performance call to Donovan Orion, met with Donovan at a private restaurant in Houston. I would piece this together later from Morris's investigation and from records that couldn't be hidden once we knew to look. Orion asked about my Montana trip, asked about my changed behavior since the Meridian assessment, asked if Donovan had noticed anything unusual in our Friday check-in. Donovan reassured him. The call had been normal. Same questions, same tone. Nothing indicated suspicion. You're seeing patterns that aren't there, Donovan said. But that night, after Orion left, Donovan went home and did what any professional information controller would do when uncertainty crept in. He searched his old files for the name that had been nagging at him since learning about my Montana trip. Morris Cobb, former FBI, specialized in cold cases, retired to Montana. Donovan sat in his dark living room reading the file, and for the first time in 18 years, he felt genuine fear. The one person who could unravel everything had been contacted. 3 investigations were converging like rivers flowing toward the same delta mine Margot's and Donovan's fear, and none of us knew yet that we were all searching for the same truth from different directions. 1 week after Montana, Morris called me. I was in my office. Morning sun through the window. Coffee going cold while I reviewed contracts that suddenly felt irrelevant compared to the call I had been waiting for. Shatsitike? The crossed-out file reference from page 3 of the 5th-year report, Morris said without preamble. Traces to Child Protective Services, Atlanta. September 17, 2005. My daughter had disappeared in March 2005, 6 months earlier. Case file describes a young girl, Morris continued. Age approximately 7, found by an unnamed adult male who brought her to the office and left before the social worker returned from break. Physical description includes a crescent-shaped birthmark on the right wrist. I stopped breathing. The file shows adoption processed through Holbrook and Associates, a law firm in Atlanta, Morris said. Sealed records. Standard private adoption through the state system, all documentation in order. The girl was placed with a family in New York within 3 weeks. The man who brought her in, I said. No description. Social worker only saw him from behind through the office window. Average height. Wore a baseball cap. Gone before anyone could get details. The girl told the intake worker she didn't remember anything before that morning. No last name, no parents, no address. Classic trauma response. Or coached, I said. Or coached. Morris agreed. There is a specific kind of silence that comes when evidence confirms what you've been afraid to think. When the shape of something too terrible to name becomes clear enough to see. Morris let me sit with it for 10 seconds. Then he asked the question that changed everything. Where was your son in September 2005? Specifically, September 15th through 20th. I accessed the old files. Digital records I kept of family schedules, school terms, business travel. The kind of documentation a security consultant maintains without thinking about it. Orion had been 12 years old in 2005. Attending Westbrook Academy, a boarding school in Atlanta. He had asked permission that year to stay an extra week after the fall term started for orientation activities. I had agreed without questioning it. Boarding school, I said. Atlanta. He asked to stay an extra week after term started. What was the name of the school? I told him. Heard him typing on the other end. 15 miles from the CPS office, Morris said. I'll call you back in 2 days. He hung up before I could respond. I sat at my desk, after Morris disconnected, staring at the boarding school name in Orion's file from 2005 Westbrook Academy, Atlanta, Georgia, fall term, 2005. The same city, the same month. And a 12-year-old boy asking permission to stay an extra week for orientation activities I had never verified. Morris had said he would call back in 2 days. I knew what he would be checking: security footage, if any still existed, school records, staff interviews, anything that could place a 12-year-old boy at a Child Protective Services office 15 miles from his school on September 17, 2005. I knew what he would find, and I knew I wasn't ready for him to find it. But the investigation no longer cared whether I was ready. It had its own momentum now, pulling us all toward the truth, whether we wanted to arrive there or not. I remembered the afternoon Orion came home from Atlanta in September 2005, 12 years old, carrying his boarding school duffel, something lighter in his posture than when he'd left. And I had thought it was maturity, not relief. 3 days after Morris's call about Atlanta, I pulled every archived document from 2005 and spread them across my home office floor. School calendars, permission slips, email printouts I had saved in the obsessive way of someone trying to maintain control while his world collapsed. Westbrook Academy fall term started September 5, 2005. 6 months after Margot disappeared. I had been barely functioning by then, moving through days on autopilot, signing whatever needed signing without actually seeing it. Permission slip dated August 28, 2005. Request for Orion Ashford to remain on campus for extended orientation activities, September 5th to 12th. My signature at the bottom. I didn't remember signing it. Email from Orion dated September 12th, 2005. Dad, grandmother passed away this morning. School is letting me attend the funeral. We'll be back September 20th. I love you. My reply, I'm so sorry, son. Take the time you need. We'll talk when you're home. I had been so consumed by Margot's disappearance that by September I was signing whatever Orion asked, grateful he was at boarding school where someone else was responsible for him while I fell apart searching for my daughter. I checked the dates. My mother had died in 2001. Gwendolyn's mother in 1998. There was no grandmother to bury in September 2005. I pulled up the school attendance records I had requested years ago for tax documentation. Westbrook Academy Fall, 2005. Student Orion Ashford, excused absence September 12th to 20th, 2005. Reason family bereavement. Return to campus September 21st, 2005. September 21st. One day after the permission expired. He had called that evening with an apology about a delayed flight, and I had told him not to worry, that I was just glad he was back safely. The CPS Atlanta office, where an unnamed man left a 7-year-old girl with a crescent-shaped birthmark, 15.3 miles from Westbrook Academy. 9 days. A 12-year-old with Atlanta bus routes and no one supervising him. No funeral to attend. No grieving relatives expecting him. Just 9 days unsupervised in a city where my daughter appeared at Child Protective Services on September 17th. There is something particularly cruel about discovering you taught someone the skills they used to destroy you. I had trained Orion in security systems that summer, before he left for boarding school, thinking I was preparing him for the family business. Taught him how to identify blind spots in surveillance coverage, how to move through spaces without drawing attention, how to understand the vulnerabilities in any system built by humans. And he had used that knowledge to hide my daughter for 20 years. I found the photo box from 2005 at the back of my filing cabinet. Family pictures I had stopped looking at after Gwendolyn died, images that hurt too much to revisit. Thanksgiving, 2005. November 24th. Orion helping with dinner, reaching across the table to hand someone a serving bowl, his right hand clearly visible in the frame. Small black ink design on the back of his right hand between the knuckles and wrist. Fresh-looking, dark edges, clean lines. The kind of tattoo that hadn't faded yet because it was recent. I zoomed in with my phone camera. Geometric pattern, deliberate placement. Too detailed to be accidental, too fresh to have been there long before the photo. 2 months after Atlanta, he was 12 years old. What 12-year-old gets a tattoo without parental permission, unless he's somewhere no one is checking? Unless he's done something he wants to mark permanently. I remembered asking him about the removal scar years later, maybe 2008, when I noticed the faint discoloration on his hand during a business meeting. He had said it was a stupid kid decision, that he'd had it removed when he turned 17. I had believed him, had thought it was normal teenage rebellion getting ink somewhere he shouldn't, and then regretting it. But the timing, the placement, the fact that he'd kept it for 5 years and then carefully removed every trace. I texted the photo to Morris with the caption, Thanksgiving 2005, right hand, 2 months after Atlanta. He had it removed at 17. Morris replied immediately. What was the design? I zoomed in further, sent a cropped close-up. Even in the old photo, the pattern was clear enough to see interlocking geometric shapes forming something that looked almost like a compass or a map reference. What do you do when you realize the child you raised, the son you taught everything you knew, has been lying to you since he was 12 years old about the thing that matters most? I sat with the evidence spread around me on the floor. Permission slip for fake orientation. Email about non-existent grandmother. Attendance record showing excused absence during the exact window when my daughter appeared 15 miles away. Photograph showing fresh tattoo as if he'd marked himself for what he'd done. A 12-year-old doesn't fabricate funeral excuses and navigate unfamiliar cities and deliver children to government offices without help. Someone adult had been part of this in 2005. Someone adult had helped him plan it, execute it, cover it. Someone adult had been helping him maintain the lie for 20 years. Morris called at 9 that evening. "The tattoo is good evidence," he said without preamble. "But I need you to think about something harder. A 12-year-old doesn't plan and execute this alone. Someone adult was helping him in 2005. Someone taught him how to do it, how to cover it, how to maintain it. And that someone has been helping him keep the secret ever since." "I know," I said. "How do you?" Morris asked. "Because whoever it is has been in your life this whole time. Close enough to monitor, close enough to adjust the cover story, close enough to know exactly what you're thinking." I looked at my phone. Tomorrow's calendar showed a meeting I never missed, monthly check-in call with Donovan Chambers. 10 a.m., scheduled for 20 years. Never missed once. "Yeah," I said to Morris. "I know." Morris called at 6:45 Monday morning, earlier than I expected, and I knew before answering that whatever he'd found was bad enough he couldn't wait. I was pulling into the office parking lot, saw his name on the screen, and pulled into a corner space away from the entrance cameras. Put the call on video. His face filled the screen. No greeting. "I'm sending you a document now," he said. "Look at page 3, section 4B, referral source." The file appeared on my phone. Atlanta law firm, Holbrook and Associates. Adoption processing documents dated October 2005. 1 month after the CPS intake. I scrolled to page 3. Section 4, B community referral source. The name typed there in official legal documentation, Orion Ashford, age 12. Listed as family acquaintance of prospective parents. No adult co-signature. No supervising attorney notation. Just a 12-year-old's full legal name on the document that processed my daughter's sealed adoption. "That's his name," I said. "His full legal name. On an adoption referral. He was 12 years old." A 12-year-old doesn't get his name on legal adoption documents without an adult attorney who knew exactly what they were doing and why, Morris said. Someone filed this paperwork. Someone processed it through the system. Someone made sure a child showed up at CPS with no memory and no identification, got placed with a family in New York, and disappeared into sealed records where no missing person search would ever connect the dots. I stared at the document. October 15th, 2005. 1 month after the CPS intake. 6 weeks after Orion's fake grandmother funeral. "Where was Donovan Chambers in 2005? Morris asked. "What city, I pulled up my business records on my phone. Old contract files, employment locations. The kind of documentation I kept on everyone who worked for me or with me. Donovan Chambers, private investigator. Primary office, Houston, Texas. Satellite office, Atlanta, Georgia, open 2002, closed 2007. "Atlanta," I said. "He had an office there from 2002 through 2007. Closed it in 2007. Said case volume didn't justify the overhead. Relocated everything to Houston." "Holbrook and Associates was 2.4 miles from his Atlanta office," Morris said. "I checked this morning. Same zip code. A 12-year-old boy needed someone who knew how sealed adoptions work, how to get a child into the system cleanly, how to make sure no flags went up when a girl with no identification and no memory appeared at Child Protective Services. Donovan specialized in missing persons cases. He knew exactly what would trigger alerts and what wouldn't. There is a specific kind of pain that comes from seeing your son's name on a legal document, placing your daughter with strangers while you sat at home believing she was dead. I hired him in March 2003, I said, to find my missing daughter. And he spent 2 years establishing your trust. Morris said. Learning your patterns. Understanding how you think, what you'd question, what you'd accept. Then, when Orion needed help in September 2005, Donovan was perfectly positioned. Same city, adult access to legal systems, professional knowledge of exactly how to make someone disappear into legitimate channels. I sat in my car watching early morning employees walk past toward the building entrance. Normal Monday morning. Coffee cups, briefcases, people starting their week. I had hired Donovan in 2003 to find my daughter. 2 years later, he was in the same city helping my son hide her in plain sight. While I sat in Houston paying him monthly retainers to search, he was in Atlanta processing adoption paperwork with Orion's name on official documents. He wasn't incompetent for 20 years, Morris said. He was competent. He knew exactly where she was and made sure you never found out. Every monthly check-in call, every report saying leads went cold, every reassurance that he was still searching, that was active deception, not failure. 20 years of reports. 240 monthly summaries. Not one negative result documented, because he couldn't document actually searching without risk of accidentally finding what he'd helped hide. The Meridian Financial Partnership I'd mentioned to him 2 years ago. He'd said, "I'll make a note," and never reported it, because reporting it would have led me straight to Margot. The crossed-out file reference numbers weren't his edits. They were evidence of what he'd removed before I ever saw the reports. "The call is today," Morris said. "Your monthly check-in, 2 p.m. right." I looked at my calendar. The recurring meeting I never missed. Donovan Chambers' monthly update, 2 p.m. "Do not confront him," Morris said. "We need 2 more pieces of evidence before we move. The adoption connection isn't enough by itself. Orion could claim he was just a kid, passing along information, didn't know what was happening. We need proof Donovan and Orion coordinated this, maintained it, actively worked together to keep her hidden. Can you make that call? Can you sound normal? How do you have a normal conversation with someone who has been lying to you about the location of your child for 20 years, while you paid him to keep lying? "I've been doing this job for 30 years, I said. "I can lie when I need to." "Good," Morris said. "Because if he suspects you know, we lose our chance to gather the rest. He'll destroy evidence, warn Orion, disappear if he has to. We get one shot at this." The call ended. I drove home instead of going into the office. Made it to the kitchen. My legs gave out before I reached the table. I sat on the floor with my back against the cabinet and looked at the clock. 7:45. The call was in 6 hours and 15 minutes. I had that long to process 20 years of systematic betrayal and prepare to sound exactly like a man who still believed every word he was being told. Morris needed 2 more pieces of evidence. I would buy him that time by becoming the thing I had spent 3 decades teaching corporations to detect a convincing liar. I sat on my kitchen floor until 8:30. Then I stood, made coffee, and began preparing for the 2 o'clock call with Donovan Chambers. The call where I would ask about recent leads, listen to his carefully constructed updates about investigations that had never happened, and sound exactly like I had for 240 consecutive months. Except this time, I would know that every word out of his mouth was a lie designed to keep my daughter hidden while he collected my money for pretending to search. The 2 o'clock call with Donovan had lasted 18 minutes, and I had performed it perfectly. Asked the right questions, made the appropriate sounds of disappointment at negative results, thanked him for continuing the search. And then I got in my car and drove with no destination in mind. November rain started somewhere on the suburban highway loop. Sudden and heavy, the way Houston weather shifts without warning. I didn't turn on the wipers immediately. Just watched the water blur the windshield until I couldn't see clearly enough to be safe. 18 minutes. I had lied for 18 minutes without a single crack in my voice, and it had felt easier than it should have. Asked about recent leads. Listened to him describe investigations he'd never conducted. Mentioned the Meridian assessment, casually waiting to see if he'd take the bait, and acknowledged the connection he'd spent 2 years hiding. He hadn't. Just said he'd make a note, same words he'd used when I first told him about the partnership. I finally turned on the wipers, watched the blades clear the glass in rhythmic sweeps. For 20 years, I had read his reports and believed them. Watched Orion mature from 12 to 32 and never questioned what he was becoming. Built a career teaching Fortune 500 corporations how to detect fraud while being defrauded in my own home by the 2 people I trusted most. The professional irony burned worse than the personal betrayal. I had spent 30 years teaching executives to identify insider threats, employees who had been trusted for years before betraying that trust, who knew the systems well enough to exploit them, who understood exactly what would trigger suspicion and what wouldn't. And I never applied that framework to my own son. Self-deception is a particular kind of blindness. You train yourself not to see the thing that would break you, and eventually you become so good at not seeing it that you forget you're choosing not to look. Gwendolyn used to say, I was better at seeing other people's problems than our own. She'd meant it as gentle criticism about my tendency to work late to focus on client issues, while family dinners grew cold. But she was right about more than either of us knew. My phone rang. Orion. I pulled over to answer. Dad, we need an emergency board meeting, 3 o'clock. The investor timeline moved up. No preamble, no apology for the short notice. Just the assumption that I would be available because I always was. I'll be there, I said. Professional tone. No hesitation. Conference room 14. The presentation's ready. He hung up before I could respond. I sat on the shoulder watching traffic pass. This was pressure about the authorization documents. Orion accelerating because he'd sensed something, not that I knew, but that I was delaying differently than usual. That I'd asked Unity Rawlings to review the paperwork instead of signing immediately. I merged back into traffic and drove downtown. Parked in the garage beneath the building where Gwendolyn and I had built something we thought would outlast us. Took the elevator to the 14th floor. The boardroom held 6 people when I arrived. Orion at the head of the table. 4 board members I'd known for years. Me. For the first time in Orion's professional life, I observed him as an investigative subject instead of as my son. He conducted the meeting with polished confidence. Knew every number without checking notes. Guided each board member toward his position about leadership transition timeline, mentioned upcoming investor presentation, used phrases like optimal positioning and strategic continuity. Every gesture was practiced. The way he touched the presentation screen for emphasis. The pauses that let important points land. The deferential glances toward me that weren't deferential at all, but were instead measuring my reactions, testing whether I still trusted him. The transition framework positions us optimally for the acquisition discussion, he said. I need my father's authorization by end of week to proceed with the investor presentation. One of the board members asked about timeline flexibility. We lose the opportunity if we delay past mid-December, Orion said. The window is narrow. He looked at me. Dad, any concerns about the timeline? Testing, measuring. I'm reviewing the documentation, I said. Unity's doing legal analysis. We'll have it done by next week's meeting. Watching your son conduct a meeting to steal your company is like watching someone you taught to swim. Use those skills to drown you, the pride and horror arrive in the same breath. Every technique he used, I had taught him. Every presentation skill, every strategic framing, every method of guiding a room toward a predetermined conclusion. He called no vote. Said we'd finalize next week. The board members filed out, discussing the investor opportunity, believing this was legitimate strategic planning instead of elaborate theft. Orion lingered after they left, studied me with new attention. "You seem different this week," he said. "Everything all right?" I recognized this as intelligence gathering, not concern. The same tone I would use in an interview when trying to determine if a subject was withholding information. "I've been thinking about your mother lately," I said. "About everything she built here. Making sure the corporation she sacrificed for stays what she intended it to be." Truth wrapped in misdirection. Words that meant one thing to him, another thing to me. His eyes shifted, looking for subtext, calculating whether I was signaling something or just being sentimental. 3 seconds of evaluation. Then he smiled and patted my shoulder. "She'd be proud of what we've done," he said. He left. I sat alone in the empty boardroom, looking at the presentation he'd abandoned on the screen. Slide 7 showed a timeline. Leadership transition complete December 15th. Circled in red, 6 weeks away. My 61st birthday. The deadline he'd been working toward while I thought we were planning normal succession. I pulled out my phone and texted Morris. "He's accelerating. Board vote next week. How long until you have what we need?" The response came immediately. "Working on it. Don't sign anything." I'm close. Close wasn't the same as done. And next week wasn't the same as 6 weeks from now. Orion had compressed his timeline because he'd sensed hesitation, and now we were in a race between his pressure and Morris's evidence gathering. I turned off the presentation screen and left the boardroom. The building felt different now. Every floor Gwendolyn had walked, planning quarterly reviews, every conference room where we'd made decisions together about the business we were building, all of it containing a conspiracy I'd been too blind to see, until I finally looked. I hadn't been inside Gwendolyn's room in 16 years, not since the week after her funeral when I closed the door and left everything exactly as it was. But Morris's text asking for any corporate documentation from 2005 through 2008 gave me a reason to finally cross that threshold. 11 at night. The house quiet. I used a flashlight instead of turning on the main light, moving through her space like an intruder in my own home. The room was exactly as she'd left it. Reading glasses on the nightstand. Book spine up at page 247, a mystery she'd never know the ending to. Her robe still hanging on the bathroom door hook. I was looking for the legal document box she'd kept on the shelf, old corporate articles, formation papers, the kind of documentation Morris needed to trace ownership structures. Found it behind a stack of her notebooks, journals she'd kept sporadically over the years. As I lifted the box, a small envelope fell from inside one notebook's cover. My name in her handwriting. Below it, "To you, when you're ready." Dated 2 weeks before she died. I sat on the floor with the flashlight and opened it. 3 handwritten pages. Dated October 2007, 1 year before her death. 16 years ago. The first paragraph stopped my breathing. "Steve, I have watched our son do things I cannot explain, and I am too afraid of the truth to ask him about them directly. So I write this instead, hoping I am wrong, praying that these suspicions are grief making me paranoid about the one child we have left." She described an incident from that summer. 15-year-old Orion on the phone in the garage, speaking too quietly. When she entered, he hung up abruptly. Became defensive when she asked who he was calling. Wouldn't meet her eyes. Another incident. She'd found him in my office at 2 a.m, searching through files. He'd said he was learning the business, but he wasn't taking notes. She'd watched from the doorway he was photographing documents with his phone. A third. She'd overheard him on the phone asking someone, "What happens if Dad dies before he signs the new ownership structure?" He was 15 years old. Who asks that question at 15? "Trey, I have no proof," she wrote. Only a mother's instinct that something is wrong. and I am too afraid of what proof might show to look for it. Grief is not linear. 16 years can pass, and then you find an envelope in your dead wife's handwriting, and suddenly it is the week after the funeral again, only now, with 20 years of accumulated failure between then and now. I kept reading. She explained her reasoning for not telling me. Our daughter was already gone. Grief consumed us both. She couldn't bear to tell me that our son might be involved in something wrong, feared it would destroy what little family we had remaining. She'd chosen to watch Orion carefully, instead of confronting him. Hoped she was wrong. Prayed her suspicions were just trauma distorting normal teenage behavior into something sinister. "How do I tell you," she wrote, "that the son we raised together might have done something to the daughter we lost? Which betrayal is worse, his or my silence about suspecting him?" The handwriting changed on the final page. Shakier. Added later, maybe weeks before she died. I was right to be afraid. Something happened last week that confirmed my worst thoughts. I cannot write the details here, I am too much a coward even now. But I have kept something for you in case you ever need it. Something I recorded by accident when I thought I was alone in the house, but wasn't. I have kept it hidden where you would never think to look, but where it would survive if you ever became ready to see what I was too afraid to show you. The next paragraph was harder to read. Her handwriting deteriorating. But I chose wrong. I chose to protect you from the knowledge and myself from your reaction to it. I chose the comfort of uncertainty over the pain of certainty. If you are reading this, I am gone. And you have finally become ready to see what I was too afraid to show you while I could still see your face. How many marriages have foundered not on the things said, but on the things both people knew and chose not to say? Thinking silence was protection when it was actually slow poison. We had both seen it, both suspected, both chosen silence over confrontation. And our daughter had spent 20 years living under a different name because neither of us had been brave enough to ask the questions that mattered. The final sentences directed me to the evidence. I keep something in the small blue medical kit in the bathroom cabinet we used to share. Bottom shelf behind the old prescriptions I kept meaning to throw away. Listen to it only if you're ready to act on what you hear. I love you. I'm sorry I wasn't stronger. Gwendolyn. I folded the letter carefully, put it in my pocket, stood and walked to the bathroom that connected to her bedroom. The cabinet still held her things. Prescription bottles from 2008. Expired pain medication I'd never thrown away because touching her belongings felt like erasing her. Bottom shelf behind the pill bottles. The small blue medical kit. I pulled it out, opened it. Inside, bandages, antiseptic, the usual first aid supplies we'd kept there for years. And beneath them, wrapped in a piece of cloth, a small USB drive. A piece of paper folded into quarters sat next to it. I unfolded it. Her handwriting again, different pen written in obvious haste. Audio recording, September 2007. I heard this by accident. It's 47 seconds long. It changes everything. I sat on the bathroom floor holding the USB drive. 16 years it had been here. 16 years she had carried this knowledge alone, hoping I'd never need it, knowing I eventually would. She had been gone since 2008. But she'd been trying to protect me all this time, leaving evidence where it would survive, where I'd find it, only when I was finally ready to understand what it meant. I closed my hand around the drive and stood. Walked back through her bedroom, past the book open to page 247, past the reading glasses, waiting for eyes that would never use them again. She'd given me what Morris needed. 47 seconds that would change everything. I just had to be ready to hear it. I plugged the USB into my laptop at 11:47 Monday night, put on headphones, and clicked the single audio file dated September 24th, 2007, 17 years ago. 1 year before Gwendolyn died, 2 years after my daughter disappeared. The audio quality was poor. Recorded from a distance like a phone left on a table or hidden in a pocket. Background noise, garage sounds maybe. A car engine cooling. Metal settling. Then a voice. 15 years old. Unmistakably Orion. What if the old man finds her, then what? A pause. Adult male voice responding. I would compare it later to confirm, but I already knew Donovan Chambers. He won't. I control every lead he sees. As long as the adoption stays sealed, there's no connection. But if he does find her, she's the legitimate heir. I get nothing. Juan, that's why you're paying me to make sure he doesn't. The girl is gone. Your father will never know. Footsteps, approaching. The audio cut off abruptly. 47 seconds. The length of time it takes to destroy 20 years of uncertainty and replace it with certainty. I sat motionless. Played it again. The voices were clear enough. Orion's teenage pitch. Donovan's careful professional tone corrupted into conspiracy. The words unmistakable. She's the legitimate heir. I get nothing. Motive. Inheritance. My daughter's existence was an obstacle to what Orion believed was his rightful claim on everything Gwendolyn and I had built. I played it a third time. Listened for background details. Garage acoustics matched our old house, the one we'd lived in until 2010. Gwendolyn must have come home early, heard voices, used her phone to record through the door before Orion noticed her presence. The handwritten note attached to the USB explained what the audio couldn't. September 24th, 2007. Orion on phone in garage. I recorded through door. Other voice sounds like the PI you hired Donovan something. I came home early from the store and heard them talking. By the time I realized what I was hearing, I was already recording. I stopped when I heard Orion coming toward the door. He never knew I was there. Her handwriting was steadier here than in the letter written closer to the event, before illness made her hand shake. I can't show you this while I'm alive, because it would destroy our family, and I am a coward. But if you're reading this, I'm gone, and you've finally become ready to do what I was too afraid to do. I'm sorry. I love you. Use this to protect what we built. Courage is not the absence of fear. It is recording evidence that could destroy your family and hiding it where your husband will only find it when you are no longer there to see the consequences. She had carried this for a year before she died. 1 year of knowing our son was conspiring with the man I was paying to find our daughter. 1 year of watching me sign monthly checks to Donovan while she knew he was actively hiding what I was paying him to reveal. And she'd said nothing. Because saying it would have broken me, and she'd believed protecting me from that knowledge was more important than exposing the truth. We had both chosen silence. Both believed we were protecting something. Both been wrong. I forwarded the audio file to Morris through encrypted email. Added the note. Gwendolyn recorded this September 2007. Orion and Donovan. 47 seconds. It's everything. Morris responded within 2 minutes. Received. Do not confront them. Audio might be admissible, but I need to verify authentication and chain of custody. This changes the timeline. We move faster now. I sat in the dark office with only the laptop screen providing light. No tears, no shouting, no collapse like earlier when the evidence had been circumstantial. This was different. This was the point where grief transforms into something harder. There is a point in every investigation where you stop feeling and start calculating, where the person you loved becomes a case file, and the grief becomes fuel for the work. I reached that point at 47 seconds. The professional calm I'd developed over 30 years of corporate security work settled over me like a familiar coat. This was no longer about my son. It was about a subject who had committed fraud, conspiracy, and kidnapping. It was about evidence, legal strategy, and building an airtight prosecution. I opened a new encrypted document, titled it Corporate Fraud Investigation, Internal Threat Assessment. Typed 3 names vertically. Donovan Chambers, primary conspirator. 20 years active deception. Evidence adoption documents, crossed out file references, 2007 audio recording. Status active threat. Orion Ashford beneficiary. Initiated age 12. Confirmed ongoing 2007. Current escalation toward December 15th deadline. Evidence Atlanta timeline adoption referral 2007 audio authorization documents. Status active threat accelerating. Unity Rawlings corporate fraud specialist. 15-year professional relationship. Legal counsel, potential ally. Status to be contacted. Under each name, I created subheadings: evidence available, evidence needed, legal strategy, timeline. This was no longer about family. It was about building a case that would survive courtroom scrutiny. I worked until 3 in the morning. Built the framework for what Morris would need. Complete timeline of evidence from 2005 to present witness list. Document inventory, legal strategy, outline, prosecution timeline. The grief would come later. Right now, I needed to be the person who had spent 30 years teaching corporations how to identify insider threats and build documentation strong enough to survive legal challenge. I had taught Orion everything he knew about security systems. Now I would teach him what happens when you use those skills against the person who gave them to you. At 2:45, I drafted an email to Unity Rawlings. Need to retain you for sensitive corporate matter. Involves my son. Conflict of interest, warning this will be adversarial. Can you meet tomorrow morning, Leland? My finger hovered over send for 10 seconds. This was the moment when family became legal case when adopted. Son became defendant when everything changed from private grief to public prosecution. I clicked send. The screen showed the sent confirmation. No taking it back now. No more investigating in silence. No more pretending normalcy while building evidence. The trap was being built. And everyone involved would soon discover what happens when a security expert stops protecting and starts prosecuting. Unity Rawlings had responded to my 3 a.m. email by 6:30 Tuesday morning. Office at 9. Bring everything. And when I walked into her 23rd floor law office overlooking downtown Houston, she already had coffee waiting and a legal pad with my son's name at the top. I spread the documentation across her conference table. Gwendolyn's 47-second audio recording with typed transcription. Morris's CPS Atlanta file showing Orion's name in the adoption referral. The authorization documents with Article 9.3 buried on page 7. 20 years of Donovan's reports with the systematic omissions I'd documented. The 2005 timeline proving Orion was in Atlanta when my daughter appeared at Child Protective Services. Unity reviewed it methodically for 40 minutes without speaking. Picked up each document, made notes on her legal pad, listened to the audio twice through headphones. I watched her face for reaction and saw only the professional assessment of an attorney who had spent 20 years evaluating evidence. Finally, she set down her pen. The audio is powerful, she said, but we'll need chain of custody verification since Gwendolyn is deceased. Morris can help establish that she had access to record it, that the voices can be authenticated. The adoption referral with Orion's name is strong. The timeline correlation is circumstantial but compelling when combined with everything else. Is it enough? I asked. Enough to stop the board vote and prevent him from taking control. She leaned back in her chair. Almost. I need one more piece. Proof he violated company bylaws before you authorized him to negotiate. That makes this corporate fraud not a family dispute. Family disputes are messy and slow. Corporate fraud is criminal and fast. What violation? Article 14.3 of your corporate bylaws, she said, pulling up a copy on her laptop. Officers cannot negotiate external partnerships or acquisitions without board notification. Has he contacted outside investors about acquiring the company? I thought about yesterday's emergency meeting, his mention of investor timeline, the December 15th deadline. He mentioned investors in yesterday's meeting, I said, but I don't have proof of contact. She turned the laptop screen toward me. You're the CEO with admin access to company email systems. You can review officer communications for compliance purposes. It's completely legal. You built those systems, didn't you? There is a specific professionalism required to sit across from an attorney and discuss legal strategy for prosecuting your own son. You separate the relationship from the crime, the love from the betrayal, and you focus only on the evidence. I designed the email security architecture in 2015, I said. Then tonight, after Orion leaves the office, you conduct a routine compliance audit, Unity said. You search communications between officers and external parties. If he's been negotiating with investors before obtaining your authorization, those emails exist. And they give us the corporate fraud angle we need. She picked up her phone. Let me get Morris on video. We need coordinated timing. Morris appeared on her screen within 2 rings, still in Montana from the background. I'm with Unity, I said. She's building the corporate case. Good, Morris said. Because I'm building the criminal one. Donovan is the weak link. Once we have corporate charges filed against Orion, I can pressure Donovan to testify about the 2005 conspiracy in exchange for reduced charges. Wow? But we need the bylaw violation first, Unity said. That's the lever that opens everything else. Corporate fraud charge filed, board vote voided, Orion removed from COO position. Then Morris's federal case becomes easier because the primary subject is already facing charges. I can access Orion's internal email tonight, I said. If the communications exist, I'll have them by tomorrow morning. Do not approach Margot until we have legal protection in place, Morris said. Do not confront Orion or Donovan. Let them believe the investigation is undiscovered. How long until the board vote? Next Tuesday, I said. 1 week. But the real deadline is December 15th. That's when the authorization would give him full control. Then we have 4 weeks, Unity said. But I can file corporate fraud charges within 1 week if the email evidence exists. Morris, how long until you can compel Donovan's testimony, huh? 2 weeks, Morris said. Maybe less if Unity's corporate charges create enough pressure. The video call ended. Unity closed her laptop and looked at me across the table covered in evidence of my son's 20-year conspiracy. This is legal compliance review, not hacking, she said. You're the CEO. These are your systems. Everything you find is admissible in corporate proceedings. I nodded. I designed the email security architecture myself. I know every access point, every log, every way to search without leaving traces that I've searched. Building security systems is like building a house. You install cameras and alarms to keep intruders out, never imagining you'll one day use those same cameras to document the betrayal of someone who always had a key. 3 decades building walls to keep threats out, I said, and the threat was inside the entire time. Tonight, Unity said, after he leaves, you find those emails we file charges Friday, and we stop this before the board meeting. I gathered the evidence back into my briefcase. The professional irony settled over me with perfect clarity. I had spent 15 years teaching corporate clients how to detect insider threats through email pattern analysis, how to identify officers who were negotiating behind the board's back, how to find the communications that proved breach of fiduciary duty. Tonight I would use those exact techniques on my own son. And I knew precisely where to look. External email domains. Recent 3 months. Search terms acquisition investor partnership proposal. Sort by date filter by recipient outside company domain flag any communications sent before board notification. The tools existed because I had built them. The access existed because I was CEO. The knowledge existed because I had spent 30 years becoming expert in exactly this kind of investigation. I left Unity's office at 11 with a clear mission. Wait for Orion to leave tonight. Access the company email server using admin credentials. Search his communications with external parties. Find dated proof of bylaw violation. The difference between hunting an external threat and hunting an internal one is that with external threats, you don't already know exactly how they think, where they'll hide evidence, what mistakes they're likely to make. With Orion, I knew all of that, because I'd taught him everything except how to hide it from me. I watched from my office as Orion's car left the parking garage at 6:47 Tuesday evening, waited 10 more minutes to be certain, then walked to the server room on the 3rd floor where our entire company digital infrastructure lived, behind biometric locks that recognized only 2 people, me and our IT director, who was on vacation in Colorado. The fingerprint scanner read my right index finger. Admin password entered. Heavy door opened with a hydraulic hiss into the climate-controlled room that held 15 years of digital records. I sat at the terminal interface I had designed in 2015. Typed the commands I had programmed myself to use for exactly this purpose, detecting threats to corporate security. Search user equals Awashford date equals August 1st, 2024, November 19th, 2024. Keywords equals acquisition investor partnership capital. The system processed for 3 seconds, returned results 47 emails matching search criteria. 47. The same number of seconds in Gwendolyn's recording. Professional coincidence or something darker, I couldn't tell anymore. I opened the first email, dated August 12th, 2024. From Orion to someone at Sterling Capital Partners. Thank you for preliminary interest. Once authorization is secured from my father, we can discuss acquisition terms in detail. Timeline December 15th, latest for control transfer. I documented the timestamp recipient content summary. Moved to the next. August 19th. Different investment firm. Same basic message. August 27th. Third firm. Each email was timestamped, logged, archived with perfect fidelity. The system I had built to detect corporate espionage was now detecting corporate theft by my own son. I worked through them methodically. No emotion, just documentation. Screenshot export timestamp recipient company name violation notation. By email 12, the pattern was undeniable. 3 separate investment firms. Orion had been shopping the company since August, while pretending to seek my authorization for routine succession planning. Every email dated before November 1st, when he first presented the authorization documents to me. Clear violations of Article 14.3. Officers cannot negotiate external partnerships without board disclosure. Each email was evidence of breach of fiduciary duty. There is a specific professional detachment required to read your son's emails plotting to steal everything you built. You focus on timestamps and recipient addresses and legal compliance, not on the fact that the person writing father's 61st birthday provides natural transition point. Learn to write emails at the desk you gave him for his 16th birthday. I exported the 12 most damning emails to an encrypted drive. Full headers, complete metadata, date stamps, recipient verification. Everything Unity would need to file corporate fraud charges. Then I noticed the Calendar Integration tab. Orion's corporate calendar synced to the email system for travel coordination. I clicked it looking for context about investor meetings, found something else entirely. December 16th, 2024. One day after the December 15th board meeting deadline, flight booking Houston to Atlanta. One way. Return date open. Calendar note attached to the booking, finished and going. I sat motionless staring at those three words. Finished and going. I pulled up the August emails again. Searched for Atlanta. Found a reference in the August 27th message to Sterling Capital. Atlanta contacts from original arrangement remain available for consultation if needed during transition. Original arrangement. 20 years ago. When a 12-year-old boy was in Atlanta at boarding school, and my 7-year-old daughter appeared at Child Protective Services 15 miles away. What do you feel when you discover your son booked a flight back to Atlanta, the city where he first took your daughter 20 years ago for the day after he planned to take your company? I exported the calendar booking. Added it to the evidence file. The flight wasn't illegal, but it was telling. Pattern recognition. Behavioral analysis. The skills I had taught him to use in corporate security, now I was using them to understand his endgame. December 16th. Either celebration or escape. Possibly both. Returning to the city where the conspiracy started one day after securing control of a $52 million corporation. Whether he planned to celebrate with whoever had helped him in 2005, or whether he had an exit strategy in case something went wrong, the booking revealed his mindset. He expected to win. Expected December 15th to go exactly as planned. Expected to walk out with everything Gwendolyn and I had spent 30 years building. I locked the evidence drive secured. The server room, walked back to my office. Called Unity from my desk phone at 8:15. 12 emails, I said when she answered. 3 external investment firms, August through October, all before board notification. Every one of them discussing acquisition terms and control transfer timelines. That's everything we need, she said. I can file the injunction tomorrow morning. Emergency board session Friday. Present the evidence void any authorization he obtained through fraud. Remove him from operational authority. There's more, I said. He booked a one-way flight to Atlanta for December 16th. Calendar note says finished and going. Silence on the other end for 3 seconds. Atlanta, she said. Where it started. And 20 years ago, I confirmed. 20 years of not knowing where my daughter was. 3 weeks of knowing everything. Tomorrow, Unity would file the legal papers that would begin to unravel 2 decades of conspiracy. I'll have the injunction ready by 9 a.m., Unity said. Board session Friday afternoon. Can you maintain normal facade until then? I've been doing it for 3 weeks, I said. 3 more days won't kill me. Though sitting across a conference table from Orion on Friday, knowing what I knew, showing him the evidence of his own emails, watching him realize the surveillance system he'd seen me build, had been documenting his betrayal that might come close. I hung up and texted Morris. Have everything Unity needs. Corporate case files Friday. Your FBI case ready. The response came within a minute. More than ready. I found something else. The blocked report from 15 years ago. Orion was 17. Call you in morning. I sat in my dark office looking at the message. 15 years ago was 2009, 4 years after the kidnapping. Orion would have been 17, still in high school, still pretending to be my grieving son while actively maintaining the conspiracy. Unity would file injunction Wednesday morning. Emergency board session Friday. 3 days until Orion discovered that the digital surveillance system he'd watched me build, the system I told him was for protecting us from external threats, had been quietly documenting his internal betrayal, one time-stamped email at a time. 3 days until everything I'd built in 3 weeks of investigation would either hold up in legal proceedings or fall apart under scrutiny. I closed the evidence file and went home to sleep like someone who wasn't prosecuting his own son. Morris called Wednesday morning. with a discovery that made 15 years of lies suddenly make perfect sense. I was filling up at a gas station on the west side of Houston, 7:30 a.m. cold November morning, the kind of routine stop where you're barely conscious, just going through motions on autopilot before heading to the office. My phone rang. Morris's name on the screen. I answered, while watching the numbers climb on the pump display. I found an anomaly in the archived investigator files, Morris said without preamble. From 15 years ago. You need to hear this now. The professional urgency in his voice made me forget about the gas pump. Focus entirely on what he was about to say. I'm listening, I said. August 2009, Morris said. 4 years after your daughter disappeared. I've been going through Donovan's original case files, the ones he kept before digitizing everything. Found a paper trail he thought he'd hidden. The gas pump numbers kept climbing. $40. $50. What did you find? Donovan submitted one truthful report in August 2009, Morris said. Just one. In 20 years of filing reports to you, this is the only one I can find where he actually documented a legitimate lead instead of manufacturing dead ends. My hand tightened on the phone. What kind of lead? A solid one, Morris said. Colorado. Specific city, specific school district. A girl matching your daughter's description and approximate age enrolled in elementary school there in 2006 under the name Margaret Turner. Teacher noticed distinctive birthmark filed routine documentation with school nurse. The nurse happened to be married to a retired detective who flagged it as potentially matching a missing persons case from 2005. The detective contacted Donovan's office. The gas pump clicked off. $63. I stood there holding the nozzle, not moving. Donovan wrote it up, Morris continued. Documented the lead, prepared to send it to you. Then something happened. The report never reached you. Instead, there's a digital trail showing the email was intercepted. Intercepted how? IP address traced to a residential internet connection, registered to your home address, Morris said. Specific device, a laptop registered under Orion's name. The interception happened August 17, 2009. Your son was 17 years old. I fumbled with the gas nozzle, nearly dropped it trying to get it back into the pump. My hands weren't working right. He was 17, I said. And already sophisticated enough to intercept internal communications from a private investigator's office to a client, Morris said. That's not script kiddie hacking. That's someone who understood network security, knew how to monitor email traffic, had the access and knowledge to redirect specific communications before they reached their destination. Before I explain how a 17-year-old pulled that off, are you still with me? Comment A if you think an adult helped him intercept it, or B if he managed it alone. Tell me why in one short reason. What comes next includes some adapted details for emotional impact, but the core truth is what I hope stays with you. The Colorado lead never reached me. The email disappeared into Orion's laptop. The teacher's observation, the nurse's documentation, the retired detective's professional instinct, all of it intercepted by my 17-year-old son before I ever knew it existed. What of that summer, I said. My voice sounded strange in my own ears, distant. The summer of 2009. What about it? Morris asked. I remembered, suddenly and completely. The memory rising like something I'd been trying not to see for 15 years. That summer, I had taught Orion advanced security protocols. He'd asked me to show him how corporate network monitoring worked. Said he was interested in the family business, wanted to understand the technical side. I'd been proud. My son taking initiative, showing genuine interest in the work I did. I had taught him how email routing worked, how to monitor network traffic, how to identify specific communication patterns. how to intercept and redirect data streams for security analysis. I had spent 3 weeks that summer sitting with him at the dining room table, showing him exactly the techniques he would need to intercept a private investigator's email to a client. Every skill he used to block that Colorado lead I had taught him. Every piece of knowledge he needed to hide my daughter from me for another 15 years I had given him personally. The summer of 2009, I taught him network security. I said to Morris. He told me he wanted to learn the business. I thought he was interested in following my career path. I was proud of him. Silence on the other end of the line. You didn't know, Morris said finally. I trained him, I said. I gave him every tool he needed, showed him exactly how to do it. The pride I felt watching him learn, I stopped. Couldn't finish the sentence. There is a specific kind of pain that comes from realizing you personally equipped someone with the skills they used to destroy you. That the teaching moments you treasured, the patience, the explanations, the satisfaction of watching someone understand complex concepts, were actually training sessions for your own betrayal. If I hadn't taught him, I said, maybe he couldn't have intercepted it. Maybe that Colorado lead would have reached me. Maybe I would have found her in 2009 instead of 2024. Oh, or maybe he would have found another way, Morris said. You can't blame yourself for teaching your son skills you thought would help him. The blame is on him for using them the way he did. I stood at the gas pump in the November cold, phone pressed to my ear, understanding something I'd been avoiding. Orion hadn't just stumbled into conspiracy. He'd been actively maintaining it for at least 15 years, since he was 17. Probably longer. Every skill I'd taught him, thinking I was preparing him for legitimate work, he'd weaponized against me. There's something else, Morris said. His tone shifted. The DNA results came back. The business partner analysis you asked me to run. I waited. The partner Orion's been working with closely for the past 3 years, Morris said. The one he keeps mentioning in those emails about investors. The DNA shows a familial connection. Half-brother, same father, different mother. I stood very still. Orion has a half-brother, Morris said. And that half-brother is neck-deep in this acquisition scheme with him. I'm still tracing the details, but it looks like they've been coordinating for years. The conspiracy wasn't just Orion and Donovan. It was bigger. Involved more family than I'd known existed. I'll call you tonight with the full breakdown, Morris said. But I thought you should know before Unity files the injunction this morning. This isn't just corporate fraud. It's a family operation. The quarterly reports blurred together as I stared at my laptop screen. Revenue projections, market analysis, client retention rates, all the numbers that usually grounded me felt meaningless today. My phone buzzed. Unknown number. Ms. Thorne, a woman's voice, professional but warm. This is Special Agent Chen with the FBI. I'm calling with preliminary results from your DNA analysis. My hand froze on the mouse. Already, we fast-tracked it given the circumstances of your case. Papers rustled in the background. Ms. Thorne, we found a match in our database. A very strong match. The office suddenly felt too small. Outside my window, Manhattan hummed with its usual chaos, oblivious. How strong? 96% probability of a parent-child relationship. Agent Chen paused. The match came from a security clearance application filed in 2004. Military contractor work requires DNA on file. My throat tightened. Do you have a name? Leland James Garrett. Date of birth, March 15, 1975. He would have been 25 when you were born in 2000. Leland Garrett. The name hit me like a physical blow. I knew that name. I knew that face. Miss Thorne, are you still there? Yes. My voice sounded distant, someone else's. Can you send me the file? I'll email everything we have within the hour. Ms. Thorne, I know this must be overwhelming. Thank you, Agent Chen. I ended the call before she could offer counseling resources or victim support hotlines. My hands were shaking so badly I had to set the phone down. Leland Garrett. 2 years ago, our firms had partnered on a cybersecurity assessment for a pharmaceutical company. 3 weeks of meetings, conference calls, shared lunches in sterile boardrooms. He'd been professional sharp, maybe 15 years older than me. We'd worked well together. The project had been successful. He'd been my biological father the entire time, and neither of us had known. I pulled up my browser fingers, clumsy on the keyboard. The search results flooded my screen. Garrett Security Consulting, military background, 20-year career specialization in digital forensics and network security. I scrolled past the professional accolades to the personal details. Married to Elizabeth Garrett née Morrison in 1997. One biological son, Orion Garrett, born June 1992. Wait, I clicked back, rereading the date. Born June 1992. If Leland married in 1997, and I was born in 2000, that meant his son Orion was born 5 years before the marriage. Which meant Elizabeth wasn't Orion's biological mother. My mind raced through the implications. Leland had a son at 17, then married someone else 5 years later. Then I was born in 2003, years into that marriage. Was I the affair? Or was there someone else, someone before Elizabeth? A Slack message from my assistant popped up. Don't forget your 2 p.m. with the board. I dismissed it without reading. I opened a new tab and searched for images. The results loaded slowly, each pixel revealing more of the face I'd sat across from in those boardroom meetings. There. A photo from a 2022 security conference. Leland Garrett stood at a podium mid-speech, the kind of professional headshot that ended up on company websites and LinkedIn profiles. I'd seen this face before. Not just in those meetings, I'd seen it in my mirror every morning for 26 years. Same sharp jawline, same deep-set eyes, same slight asymmetry to the left eyebrow that I'd always hated in photos. My hand trembled as I zoomed in on the image. How had we sat in the same room for 3 weeks and not seen it? How had we shaken hands, discussed encryption protocols, shared coffee, and never once felt that pull of recognition? But we wouldn't have been looking for it. Why would we? I was just another cybersecurity professional to him. He was just another potential business partner to me, except he wasn't. He was the man whose DNA had created me, whose features I'd inherited, whose career path I'd somehow followed without ever knowing his name. I pulled up our project files from 2024. There were photos from the final presentation, our teams celebrating the successful security audit, champagne glasses raised. I found the group shot and expanded it. There we were, standing side by side. Me in a navy blazer, him in a gray suit. Both smiling at the camera. Both completely unaware that we were father and daughter. I'd even joked with him about our shared coffee addiction. Must be genetic, I'd said, laughing as we both reached for our 3rd cups of the afternoon. Must be genetic. The irony was suffocating. My office door opened. Margot, I have those reports you... My assistant stopped mid-sentence. Are you okay? You look pale. I managed a nod and she retreated, closing the door softly. My phone buzzed again. The email from Agent Chen had arrived. I opened the attachment with numb fingers. Official DNA analysis probability matrices, genetic markers highlighted in yellow. And there at the bottom of page 3, a scanned image from his 2004 security clearance application. The photo was younger. He would have been 29, still military trim haircut, serious expression for the government photographer. But it was unmistakably him, unmistakably my father. I navigated back to the Garrett Security Consulting website to the About Us page I'd reviewed 2 years ago when vetting his company for our partnership. His profile photo loaded. Current confident professional. My hand trembled as I scrolled, reading the biography I'd skimmed before, as due diligence and now reread as archaeology military service Bronze Star transition to private sector founded GSC in 2008, specialized in cases involving missing persons and digital forensics. Missing persons. Had he been searching all these years? Had he been looking for missing children, never knowing he had one of his own out there? Or had he known about me and chosen this work as penance? Or had he never known I existed at all? I stared at his photo until my vision blurred, trying to reconcile the professional colleague with the biological father, the stranger with the other half of my DNA. Leland Garrett. We'd worked together, shaken hands, said goodbye after the project ended with vague promises to collaborate again sometime. And now I knew my business partner was my biological father. I left my digital fingerprints in Orion's email server 4 days ago. Not careless, deliberate. When you need to know what your son is hiding, you use the tools he taught you to use. And when you want him to know you've been there, you leave traces only he would recognize. The question wasn't if he'd find them. The question was what he'd do when he did. Saturday morning, I had my answer. Orion sat across from me at the kitchen table, coffee untouched, shoulders carrying tension he thought I wouldn't notice. 25 years of watching him grow from a frightened 8-year-old into this composed stranger had taught me his tells. The stillness in his hands, the fractional delay before responding, the way his eyes tracked to his phone every 30 seconds. Dad, about the financial authorization. He started the script he'd rehearsed. I haven't asked hard questions in 20 years. I cut him off, kept my voice level. That's my fault. His jaw tightened. We've been through this. The authorization is standard. See, then my lawyers can review every clause. I set down my coffee cup, carefully maintained eye contact. I'll sign next week. The silence stretched between us. Not the comfortable quiet of family breakfast, but the calculated pause of chess players measuring positions. That's a time-sensitive opportunity, Orion said finally. The board meets Tuesday, then they'll meet again the following week. I stood, rinsed my cup in the sink, kept my back to him so he couldn't read my face. I'm not saying no. I'm saying my attorneys need time to do their job. Behind me, I heard his chair scrape back. Heard him gather his phone and keys with movements a shade too controlled. I appreciate you being thorough, he said, the corporate voice smooth and empty. I'll have my office send over the full documentation package. You do that. I didn't turn around until I heard his car pull out of the driveway. Then I stood at the sink, watching Saturday morning light catch the dust motes, and let myself feel the weight of what I knew. My son had spent 15 years burying a truth I'd paid someone to find. Donovan Chambers, 62. The private investigator I'd hired in 2004 to search for Margot had filed one honest report in August 2009, a Colorado lead that might have brought her home. And Orion, 17 years old, and already too clever, had intercepted it using network security skills I'd personally taught him that summer. I'd thought I was preparing him for college applications. I'd been arming him for a cover-up. The coffee in my cup had gone cold. I poured it down the drain, thinking about all the other things I'd watched disappear without asking where they went. My phone buzzed. Elizabeth asking if I'd picked up groceries. I'd completely forgotten. I texted back that I'd go this afternoon, then stared at the empty kitchen. 20 years. I'd trusted Donovan's reports, accepted his explanations, believed the investigation was thorough. 20 years I'd watched Orion build a successful career, never questioned why he'd changed his surname to Ashford when he started his company. Compartmentalization, the therapist called it. A reasonable response to grief. Elizabeth and I had rebuilt our lives focused on what we could control. We'd survived, except Margot hadn't been missing. She'd been hidden. The evidence sat in my office, safe, now archived email threads, pulled from Orion's server Wednesday night. Conversations between Orion and Donovan spanning 15 years. Payment records. Instructions for suppressing leads. Details about business arrangements with a cybersecurity consultant named M. Thorne Margot, who'd worked with me 2 years ago, who'd sat across conference tables from her biological father, and neither of us had known. Morris's DNA results had confirmed it. Orion's business partner was his half-sister, my daughter. I didn't know if Margot knew the truth. I didn't know whether she'd been searching for me, or had built her life without needing the father who'd lost her. But I knew the board meeting was in 3 days. Orion needed my signature on financial authorization documents I'd barely glanced at before Morris started asking questions. My lawyers had the paperwork now already flagging irregularities. Orion knew I'd accessed his email. My digital signature on the server logs was sophisticated enough to fool most audits, but not the forensic analysis he'd run once he got suspicious. And he'd be suspicious now. My sudden insistence on legal review had signaled exactly what I'd intended. I know what you did. Upstairs, the shower turned on. Elizabeth's Saturday morning routine unchanged for 20 years. The normalcy felt like another country. My phone rang. Morris. He just called Donovan, Morris said without preamble. Emergency meeting in Houston tonight. Donovan's flying in from Seattle. You're monitoring Donovan's communications. You hired me to find answers. Papers rustled. They're spooked. Whatever you said to Orion this morning, he's treating it as a threat condition. I told him my lawyers needed to review the authorization documents. That's it. That's enough. I walked to the window. He knows I know. The question is what he'll do about it. What do you want me to do? Come, keep monitoring. I need to know what they're planning. I paused. And Morris, get me everything you can find on Margot Thorne's current location. If this escalates, she deserves to know before she gets caught in the middle. I ended the call and stood in the empty kitchen surrounded by 20 years of family life, built on a foundation I hadn't known was cracked. 3 days until the board meeting. 3 days until Orion and Donovan would execute whatever plan they'd devised to contain the truth. 3 days to decide whether I'd sign the authorization and buy time to investigate or refuse outright and force the confrontation now. My son had spent 15 years running from something. Now we were both out of room to run. Saturday night, I sat in my home office waiting for Morris to call. Donovan's flight had landed 20 minutes ago. By now, Orion would be wondering why his emergency counselor hadn't answered his texts. My phone buzzed. Morris. I got to him first, Morris said without preamble. Baggage claim before Orion's driver could. I exhaled slowly. And told him Orion was waiting, but he was talking to me first. Paper rustled in the background. Showed him the envelope. 18 years of intercepted reports. Every suppressed lead. His signatures on every payment authorization from Orion. What did he say? Tried the lawyer script. You can't prove I knew. I was following client instructions. Morris's voice hardened. So I showed him page 12, his handwritten notes from 2009 discussing how to redirect the Colorado inquiry without raising flags. Through my office window, Houston's night skyline glittered with indifferent beauty. Somewhere out there, Donovan Chambers was calculating his options. Somewhere else, my son was waiting for advice that wasn't coming. Where is he now? Coffee shop in Terminal B. I gave him 12 hours. Morris paused. Told him I file everything with the FBI tomorrow morning at 9, or he files first against Orion. You think he'll flip? He's 62 years old with a clean record except for this. Orion's already planning how to contain the damage. Donovan knows he's the containment plan. Papers shuffled again. He'll flip. Question is whether we need him to. I thought about the board meeting Tuesday. About Orion summoning Donovan for emergency strategy tonight. About my son waiting for a crisis counselor who was busy choosing between prison and testimony. Let me know what he decides. Will do. And Leland. Morris's voice softened. The official DNA results should be in by Wednesday. Full genetic analysis lab certification, the works. Wednesday, 10 days from the sample date. Standard processing. He paused. Soon. The call ended. I sat in the dark office thinking about time. 32 years since Margot disappeared. 18 years since Donovan filed his one honest report. 10 days since I'd submitted DNA. 3 days until the board meeting. Time collapsing into now. Wednesday morning, my phone rang at 8:47 a.m. Morris didn't bother with greeting. Official results just came through. 99.7% probability, 26 genetic markers, direct biological father-daughter relationship, no ambiguity. The phone felt too heavy in my hand. Say that again. She's yours, Leland. Confirmed, certified, legally documented. I looked at the framed photo on my desk, Elizabeth and me on our wedding day. Young and certain, the world made sense. 28 years ago, 3 years before Margot was born. 3 years before I became a father to a daughter I wouldn't meet until she was 26 years old. If I met her at all. You still there? Morris asked. Yeah, my voice sounded distant. Yeah, I'm here. The FBI's sending her the results too. Same notification. She'll know by noon. After Morris hung up, I sat motionless for 10 minutes, staring at Elizabeth's smile frozen in silver frame. Then I said it out loud to her photo, to the empty office, to the universe that had taken 32 years to bend back toward truth. I found her. I finally found her. The phone rang. My hand hovered. 32 years compressed into one vibration. But it was just Elizabeth asking if I'd be home for dinner. I told her yes. Told her I loved her. Didn't tell her why my voice cracked. Not yet. Not until I knew what happened next. The FBI had provided a secure email channel for contact between us. Neutral ground, monitored but private. I opened my laptop and stared at the blank message field. What do you say to a daughter who's been gone for 32 years? What words bridge that canyon? I typed 4 versions, deleted 3. Finally settled on truth stripped to its foundation. Margot, I received the results today. I'm ready when you're ready. Whatever you need, whatever you want to know. On your terms, on your timeline. I've waited 32 years. I can wait as long as you need. Leland, I read it 5 times before hitting send. Then I waited. 2 hours felt like decades. I tried to work, couldn't focus. Tried to eat lunch, couldn't taste it. Tried not to check email every 90 seconds, failed completely. At 2:17 p.m., the notification chimed. New message from M. Thorne. My hand shook opening it. Tomorrow, 10 a.m., Rosewood Cafe on Westheimer. Just us. No lawyers, no FBI, no intermediaries. Just the 2 of us. If that works, confirm and I'll send the address. M. The email notification chimed again. I read it 3 times before my vision cleared enough to see the cursor blinking. She wasn't asking. She was deciding. Setting the terms, choosing the location, defining the boundaries. Not waiting for her biological father to dictate the reunion, taking control of it herself. I typed 1 word, confirmed. 30 seconds later, another message arrived. The cafe's address. A note at the bottom, I'll be at the back table, I'll get there early. No signature this time, just information, just the next step. I sat back in my chair and let myself feel it, the weight of tomorrow morning. 10 a.m. A cafe on Westheimer I'd never heard of. A daughter I'd lost before she could walk, returning on her own terms. The board meeting was Tuesday. Orion's crisis was escalating. Donovan's deadline was tomorrow at 9 a.m., 1 hour before I'd walk into that cafe. But none of that mattered right now. Right now, all that mattered was that 12 hours from now, I'd meet my daughter. 32 years of searching would end in a cafe Margot had chosen with words I hadn't yet found, toward a future I couldn't yet imagine. I had 12 hours to prepare for a moment I'd been preparing for since the day she disappeared. It wasn't enough time. It was all the time in the world. At 3 a.m., I lay in the dark, running through every version of how the meeting could go wrong. She walks in, sees me, walks out. She stays, but tells me she has parents, a life, no room for a biological father who lost her before she could walk. She asks why I gave up searching, and I can't explain without admitting I trusted the wrong people, believed the wrong reports, failed her for 32 years. Every opening line I'd rehearsed sounded hollow. I've thought about you every day. Not enough. I never stopped searching. Except I hadn't I? What if she only wanted medical history? What if she needed closure, not connection? What if I was about to meet my daughter just to watch her walk away again? I got out of bed at 3:47, downstairs to my office, opened the desk drawer where I'd kept it for 32 years. The badge, small brass, hand engraved. I'd commissioned it the week after she was born, had the craftsman inscribe her full name and birth date on the back. MEG, February 12, 2000. Planned to give it to her on her 16th birthday. Instead, I'd carried it. Through military deployments, career changes, Elizabeth's cancer scare in 2015, Orion's troubled adolescence. Through every case I'd worked, every missing child I'd helped find. I'd kept it like a prayer, like proof she was real. I traced the engraving with my thumb, thinking about Elizabeth's words from years ago. You protect everyone else. When will you let someone protect you? Sitting in my office at 4 a.m., holding a badge engraved for a daughter who didn't know me, I understood vulnerability. Walking into that cafe in 6 hours meant risking everything: ego, hope, the fantasy I'd built of reunion for something I couldn't control. I engraved your name before I ever held you, I whispered to the badge. Please let that mean something. The morning came slowly, then too fast. I arrived at Rosewood Cafe at 9:42. Ordered coffee I wouldn't drink. Chose a table at the back with clear sight lines, old habits from security work. At 9:58, she walked in. I knew her immediately. Not just from photos, but from bone-deep recognition that transcended logic. She had my mother's height, my jawline, something in the way she moved that echoed family I'd lost decades ago. She wore a navy blazer, and on her lapel, catching morning light, a small brass badge. Our eyes met. She didn't smile, didn't wave, just walked toward the back table with controlled precision. Leland, she said. Not a question. Margot. We stood there for 5 seconds that felt like years. Then she sat. Thank you for coming, I said, and immediately hated how formal it sounded. She nodded once, then reached up, unpinned the badge from her lapel, and placed it on the table between us. Morning light through cafe window. Her hands looked exactly like my mother's. I stared at the badge, small brass hand engraved. Even from across the table I could see the inscription. I don't know why I kept it, she said quietly. I was too young to remember getting it. It was just always in my jewelry box. Every time I moved apartments, changed jobs, reorganized my life, I kept it. I just knew I had to. My hands were shaking as I reached into my jacket pocket. Pulled out the twin badge I'd carried for 32 years. Placed it beside hers. 2 identical badges. Same size, same brass, same craftsman's mark. Different inscriptions, hers with initials I didn't know, mine with the name I'd given her. I kept mine for the same reason, I said. She stared at them side by side. Her breathing had changed, shallower, faster. When she looked up, her eyes were bright with tears she wasn't letting fall. I got the DNA results yesterday morning, she said. Sat in my office reading the report, and all I could think was, I met you 2 years ago. We worked together for 3 weeks. We had coffee. I joked about our shared coffee addiction being genetic. I know. You knew when. Huh? Found out last week. Morris, the investigator I hired to reopen your case, he connected the dots. Monsieur Thorne, cybersecurity consultant. Partnership in 2024. I paused. I've been working with my daughter for 2 years without knowing. She absorbed that. Orion, your son. Yes. So who's also my half-brother? Yes. The badges caught light simultaneously. Twin inscriptions. Same craftsman. Same hope. I don't know what I want this to be, Margot said finally. Her voice was steady, but her hands were clasped tight. I don't know if I want a father or just answers, or if I'm even ready for either. I looked at her. This stranger who was my daughter. This accomplished woman who'd built a life without me. This person who'd kept a brass badge she couldn't remember receiving because something in her knew it mattered. I don't know either, I admitted. I don't know how to be your father when I missed 32 years. I don't know what you need from me. But you do want it. Yes, more than anything. She nodded slowly, looking at the badges between us. I'm not promising anything, she said. I'm not calling you Dad. I'm not moving to Houston or playing happy family. I have a life. I have people who raised me. I understand, but I'm here, and that's something. It's everything. The badges sat between us on the table. Physical proof we'd both held on. But now what? We had 32 years of questions and 2 hours to decide whether to ask them. So we talked about spreadsheets instead. What made you choose contract analysis? I asked, reaching for neutral ground. She wrapped both hands around her coffee mug. I'm good with patterns. Financial statements, partnership, agreements, numbers, tell stories people don't mean to reveal. You're looking for what people are trying to hide. Usually what they're hiding from themselves. She took a sip, eyes steady. Numbers don't lie the way words do. A pattern shows up whether you want it to or not. I thought about the 18 years of payment records Morris had pulled from Orion's email. Patterns that told stories my son hadn't meant me to see. Must take patience. Sitting with data until it reveals itself. Or less patience than people think. More stubbornness. A slight smile touched her mouth, gone quickly. Once I know something's there, I can't stop until I find it. The smile echoed something in my mother's old photographs. Determined. Relentless. That sounds familiar, I said quietly. Does it? I spent 20 years in military and contract security, finding system vulnerabilities before someone else could exploit them. I turned my coffee cup. You learn to look for patterns, things that don't fit. And when you find them, you document, report, recommend fixes. I paused. Sometimes the client doesn't want to hear it. Fixing it means admitting it existed in the first place. So they ignore you, or hire someone who'll tell them what they want to hear. She nodded. I've had clients pull contracts after I flagged inconsistencies. They'd rather not know than face what the numbers were saying. We talked about work for another 40 minutes. Her cybersecurity consulting my transition from military to private sector, the overlap in our client bases. Parallel careers in parallel cities developing parallel skills, never knowing we shared the same genetic drive to uncover truth. Coffee gone cold an hour ago. Neither moved to order more. And you spent your career finding vulnerabilities, she asked finally. Someone has to find the weakness before the wrong person does. She was quiet, then said softly, Sounds like you do that to yourself too. I looked up sharply. What do you mean? You find your own weaknesses, document them, report them to yourself. She tilted her head slightly, so nobody else can exploit them first. The observation landed like a punch I hadn't seen coming. How did she see after 90 minutes what Elizabeth's therapist had spent months trying to get me to acknowledge? Yeah, maybe. Not maybe. She wasn't pushing, just stating fact. I do it too. Find the weakness, shore it up, make sure nobody can use it against me. Build my life like a security system. And does it work? I'm successful, independent. Nobody controls my decisions. She looked at the badge in her palm. But I also kept a piece of brass I couldn't remember receiving, and when a stranger sent me DNA results, I flew to Houston instead of deleting the email. Why did you? The numbers said you were my biological father. The pattern said something was missing. She met my eyes. So I followed the data. That's all this is, data analysis. I don't know what else it could be yet. The cafe had filled and emptied around us. Lunch rush come and gone. We'd been talking nearly 2 hours, and we hadn't mentioned Orion once. Hadn't discussed the separation or the 18 years of lies. We'd chosen to build a foundation first. See if connection was possible before weighing it down with history. December light through window. 2 shadows sitting finally recognizing each other. I should probably go, Margot said. I have a late flight back. Back to New York. Yeah. She gathered her things, slipped the badge into her pocket instead of her purse. I don't know what this was. It was something. Yeah, something. We stood. The moment stretched awkward, do we shake hands, hug. Thank you for coming. I said, meaning it differently this time. She nodded, started toward the door, then stopped, turned back. My adoptive parents are good people, she said, firm, clear. I need you to know that. I could have bristled, could have felt threatened, diminished. But looking at her, this woman who'd kept a badge she couldn't remember, who'd built a careful life with layers of protection, who'd flown to Houston despite every logical reason not to, I felt only relief that someone had loved her when I couldn't. I'm glad, I said, and meant it completely. I mean that. Her shoulders dropped slightly, tension releasing. Okay. She adjusted her bag. I'll email you. Not tomorrow, but when I'm ready for more. Whenever you're ready. I'm not promising. I know, and that's okay. She studied me one more time, then nodded and pushed through the door into December afternoon. I stood at the window and watched her walk to her rental car, get in, drive away. Watched until the car disappeared and the street looked like any other Houston street on any other Thursday. 2 hours, 2 badges, 2 people who'd spent 32 years apart learning to see patterns and find vulnerabilities. She hadn't promised when she'd contact me. Hadn't promised anything except honesty about not knowing what this could be. But she'd come. She'd stayed. She'd kept the badge. For now, that was enough. The boardroom trap closed from both sides at once. And for the first time in 20 years, my son and I looked at each other without pretending. Orion sat at the head of the conference table, Friday morning, proxy documents stacked in front of him. 6 board members, 2 lawyers, me at the far end. The emergency meeting he'd called to force the authorization vote. We vote today, Orion said. Voice steady, corporate smooth. I have the proxies. This ends now. I said nothing. Just watched him lay out papers with careful precision. The documentation package has been reviewed, he continued. All parties have received financial disclosure statements. Per our bylaws, we can proceed with simple majority. Unity Rawlings, 58, board member with forensic accounting background, stood slowly. Before we vote, she said, I need to present evidence of potential violations under Article 14.3. Orion's jaw tightened. Unity, this isn't the time. 12 emails. She placed a folder on the table. Dated across 15 years. Evidence of systematic suppression of investigation results payment authorizations. To maintain false information, deliberate concealment from majority stakeholder, she slid the folder to Orion. Article 14.3 covers violation of fiduciary duty. I'm calling for immediate suspension of the authorization vote. Orion's lawyer reached for the folder. I watched my son's face, the calculation, the realization that Unity hadn't brought this alone, that someone had fed her evidence, that I had. The boardroom door opened. 2 FBI agents entered, badges visible. The lead agent approached Orion. Orion Ashford, we have a federal order requiring your cooperation with an ongoing investigation into obstruction of a missing persons case. We'll need access to all company records related to Donovan Chambers and case number 2000-4482. The room went silent. Conference room door clicks shut behind FBI agents. The sound echoes. Orion looked at me across 12 feet of polished table. Really looked not performance of son at father, but cold assessment of opponent to opponent. I looked back. Didn't hide that I knew everything. Just let him see the game was over. The conversation happened without words. You knew, you've known. Yes, and you know I know. His eyes swept the room. Unity with her evidence. FBI with their order. His lawyer uncertain. Board members uncomfortable. No allies. Donovan gone. The walls crumbling. I need to consult with counsel, Orion said finally. Voice still steady but cracking at the edges. Of course, the FBI agent said. We can wait while you make arrangements. Orion gathered his papers with movements too controlled to be natural. Didn't look at me again. Just nodded to his lawyer and walked out with the measured pace of someone refusing to run. The door closed. Unity moved to table the vote indefinitely. Unanimous approval. Meeting ended in 10 minutes. I sat at the conference table after they left, staring at the empty chair where my son had sat, trying to force through a vote that would have secured assets hidden through 15 years of deception. Morris found me there 20 minutes later. Donovan's testimony came through this morning, he said, sitting in Orion's empty chair. Full cooperation in exchange for immunity. What did he give them? Everything. Morris paused. And one detail I hadn't known. Orion figured out you were investigating 3 weeks ago. Montana trip. I thought about Montana. The business conference where I'd spent evenings making calls I thought were private. He knew since Montana. Donovan says Orion confronted him the day after you got back. Told him to keep feeding you information but control the pace. Orion thought he could watch you investigate while keeping the outcome contained. Morris's voice held something between admiration and disgust. He was watching you watch him. Until the email breach. Until the email breach, Morris confirmed. You accessing his server panicked him. He rushed the timeline, left violation evidence undeleted, trying to move fast enough to stay ahead of you. One moment of panic had unraveled 18 years of patient deception. The FBI will take him into custody within the hour, Morris said. Formal arrest processing arraignment. I nodded slowly, watching dust motes drift through afternoon light. Do you want to see him before they take him? Morris asked quietly. 20 years of raising him, one syllable to end it. No. I thought about Orion at 8, small and frightened. Orion at 17, learning network security from me. Orion at 32, trying to steal what was never his. I thought about Margot driving away yesterday. Her promise to email when ready. The fragile connection that might not survive what came next. 20 years raising a son who'd blocked his half-sister's return. 32 years searching for a daughter someone else had loved when I couldn't. No, I said finally. I don't want to see him. Morris nodded. Stood. That's the right call. For what it's worth. Is it? He made his choices. You made yours. The door closed. I sat alone in the boardroom surrounded by wreckage of a family built on deception from the start. My phone buzzed. Elizabeth, coming home for dinner. I typed back, yes, we need to talk. 4 months of legal proceedings, and I hadn't looked at Orion once. Today's verdict wouldn't change that. I sat in the federal courthouse gallery 3rd row, back studying the wood grain on the chair armrest. The pattern looked like a river viewed from above, tributaries branching and merging. I'd memorized every bend over 14 days of testimony. The courtroom filled around me, lawyers shuffling papers, journalists in the press section. Morris 2 rows back. Orion's defense attorney looking professionally composed despite knowing they'd lost. Orion sat at the defendant's table in the same gray suit he'd worn to our last family dinner before everything collapsed. 32 years old, the son I'd raised from 8, the man who'd spent 18 years hiding his half-sister's existence. I kept my eyes on the wood grain. All rise. The judge entered. We stood sat. The mechanical choreography of justice. Has the jury reached a verdict? We have your honor. Papers passed from jury foreman to bailiff to judge. The rustle amplified in the silent courtroom. On the charge of conspiracy to commit child abduction, how do you find guilty? The word landed heavy. On the charge of obstruction of a federal investigation, guilty. On the charge of corporate fraud and violation of fiduciary duty, guilty. 8 charges total, guilty on all counts. Each verdict another stone added to a weight that had been building for months. I traced the wood grain with my thumb. The river pattern had a knot near the edge, an imperfection that made it real, kept it from being too perfect. I'd found comfort in that imperfection over 2 weeks of testimony. The judge set sentencing for 6 weeks out. The gavel fell soft, final, but not dramatic. Just the end of one phase. People filed out. Orion was led away by marshals, hands behind his back, face carefully neutral. I stayed in my seat, studying the wood grain that had become my anchor through 14 days I'd attended, but not really witnessed. Courthouse hallway echoes. Every footstep sounds like a gavel. Morris found me in the emptying courtroom. So, how are you? He asked quietly, sliding into the row beside me. I considered the question. Figuring out what how means now. When you did what you had to do. Did I? I looked up from the armrest. I testified against my son. Put him in prison for probably 15 years. Chose one child over another. You chose truth over deception. Morris's voice was gentle but firm. Orion made his choices 18 years ago. You just stopped protecting him from consequences. That's what you tell yourself when you destroy your family. You didn't destroy it. It was already destroyed. He paused. You just finally saw it clearly. I nodded slowly, unconvinced, but exhausted. The bailiff eventually asked me to leave so they could close the courtroom. I walked out into Houston afternoon sunshine, April warmth that felt disconnected from the air-conditioned finality I'd just witnessed. Justice delivered. Closure achieved. Victory hollow. A week later, Unity called requesting a meeting at my office. She arrived with a folder of board documents and careful professionalism. The board voted unanimously yesterday, she said, settling into the chair across from my desk. The ownership structure holds. Orion's attempted takeover is completely reversed. All assets returned to proper allocation. The corporation is stable. I looked at the photo on my desk. Elizabeth, 3 years ago, standing in front of the headquarters building she'd spent 20 years building from a small consulting firm into a mid-sized security corporation. She'd known something was wrong toward the end. The letter she'd left the USB drive hidden in the blue medical kit she'd been trying to protect, what she'd built, even when she knew she wouldn't be there to defend it. Your wife's company is safe, Unity said softly. She knew, I said. Toward the end, she knew something was wrong. Left me the map to protect it. Unity nodded. The letter referenced concerning financial patterns, questionable advisory relationships. She was documenting what she saw. She was always better at seeing patterns than I was. Wife's photo, daughter's badge, two women 32 years apart, both showing him forward. So, what do you want to do with it? Unity asked. The company. You're majority shareholder now. You could maintain operations, sell it, restructure leadership. The board will support whatever you choose. I pulled open my desk drawer, looked at the brass badge I'd carried for 32 years. Looked at my phone where Margot's text from 3 days ago sat, "Coffee next week if you're free." Actual conversation this time, not just testing each other. 4 months since the cafe. 4 months of careful emails that tested boundaries without pushing them. Occasional phone calls that lasted 5 minutes or 50, depending on comfort levels. One dinner in February that had been awkward but not catastrophic, where we'd talked about work and carefully avoided Orion's approaching trial. 4 months of building something fragile that might eventually become family. I need to call someone first, I said. Unity tilted her head. Your lawyer, my daughter. Her expression shifted to understanding. Margot. She has a stake in this too. I looked at Elizabeth's photo. The family that decides what happens to this company should be the family that's moving forward, not the one I thought I had 20 years ago. Unity stood, gathered her folder. Take your time. The board's patient. We've waited this long for clarity, we can wait a little longer. After she left, I sat holding my phone, Elizabeth's photo, watching from its frame. The verdict was delivered. Justice served. Orion would spend years in federal prison for crimes that had destroyed 2 families across 3 decades. But none of that answered Unity's question. What did I want? For 32 years, I'd wanted to find my daughter. For 4 months, I'd been carefully learning who she actually was, not the child I'd imagined, but the accomplished woman she'd become without me. Now I needed to ask if she wanted to help me figure out what came next. I typed, "Coffee next week works. I need your advice on something. Not about the past, about the future." Her reply came 3 minutes later. Tuesday, same cafe. Tuesday, same cafe. I looked at Elizabeth's photo. She came back, I whispered. I found her. Now I have to figure out how to be her father when I'm 32 years too late to learn. Elizabeth's letter had ended with 5 words I'd memorized. Family is what we build. Not what we're born with. Not what we lost. What we build. 4 days until Tuesday. 4 days to figure out how to ask my daughter if she wanted to build something with me. The second meeting had no agenda. No badges on the table, just a daughter asking what her mother was like. Tuesday came. We sat at the same cafe, same back table, but this time Margot didn't start with the company question I'd expected. She wrapped both hands around her coffee mug and asked something harder. Tell me about my mother. I looked at her across the table, this woman who had Elizabeth's determination written in every careful movement. She loved systems, I said, slowly finding my way into memory. Not numbers like you, people systems, how teams work together. She could walk into a room and within 20 minutes understand who actually made decisions, who held informal power where the bottlenecks were. That's how she built the company. From a 3-person consulting firm to a mid-sized security corporation over 20 years. She saw patterns in organizational structure the way you see them in financial data. I paused. She would have liked you, recognized herself in you. Margot studied her coffee. Does my mother know about me? The question landed carefully between us. She suspected, but had no evidence, I said. Toward the end, she knew something was wrong with Orion's business dealings. She left me a letter, a USB drive with documentation clues that eventually helped me find you. So she knew I existed but never met me. She suspected. She tried to leave me a map. I met her eyes. If she'd lived long enough to see me find you, it would have been everything to her. Margot nodded slowly, processing loss layered with loss. A mother she'd never known who'd tried to help reunite them from beyond whatever had taken her. We talked for another hour. Not about the company, that question sat forgotten. Just about Elizabeth. Her quirks, her fierce loyalty, her habit of solving problems by drawing org charts on napkins. The way she'd built something meaningful from almost nothing. When we left that day, Margot said she'd think about the company question. But I knew we'd found something more important than business advice. 3 weeks later, she texted asking to meet again. Different location this time. A park near her hotel, shorter meeting, more natural. Different setting. No cafe table between them. Walking side by side instead of facing. We walked the path in late January, cold, our breath visible in Houston winter air. I need your perspective on something, Margot said, hands in her coat pockets. Professional question. Okay. What would you do if the numbers say yes, but the timeline feels forced? She glanced at me. Client pushing to finalize a partnership agreement within 2 weeks when standard due diligence takes 6. Check who benefits from the rush, I said immediately. Someone's trying to close before you can find something. Security before profit. She stopped walking, turned to face me. Hadn't thought that angle. I was focused on whether the financial projections were sound. Numbers tell you if a deal works. Timeline tells you if someone's hiding why it works. So you'd recommend extended due diligence even if it risks losing the opportunity? I'd recommend finding out what they're afraid you'll discover in week 3. I started walking again. You're better than me at reading financial patterns. But I've spent 30 years finding what people try to hide in security systems. In this one thing, I'm better. She caught up, fell into step beside me. First time I've heard you admit limits. So getting older, learning that being good at one thing means accepting you're not good at everything. We walked in silence for a few minutes. Then she smiled, small, brief, but the first time I'd seen it directed at me. I'm going to tell the client we need 6 weeks, she said. And I'm citing security concerns as justification. They'll either agree or reveal why they can't wait. And either way, I know what I'm dealing with. We reached the park entrance where she'd parked. The afternoon was fading into early winter evening, temperature dropping. She turned to face me, hands still in pockets, breath misting in the cold. Are you free next week? She asked. Then so quietly, I almost missed it. Dad! The word hung in cold January air. Neither of us pretended it didn't matter. I felt something crack open in my chest. 32 years of searching, 4 months of careful boundary testing, all leading to 3 syllables that changed everything. Yes, I managed. I'm free next week. She nodded once, quick and almost businesslike, but I saw her throat work. Good. I'll text you. She walked to her car without looking back, and I stood in the parking lot watching her go. Dad. Not biological father, not Leland. Dad. The title I'd lost the right to 32 years ago offered back not as obligation, but as choice. Not because I'd earned it through years of presence, but because she'd decided after months of testing, questioning, careful evaluation, that maybe I could earn it going forward. My phone buzzed an hour later. Her text. Thank you for the advice, and for showing up when I ask. It matters. I read it 5 times before responding. Thank you for giving me the chance. 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Finally, see you next week, Dad. I sat in my car in the parking lot as evening darkened to night, staring at that word on my phone screen. Orion was in federal prison. Elizabeth was gone. The company was stable but rudderless. Morris had moved on to other cases. The life I'd built for 20 years had collapsed and been rebuilt in 4 months into something unrecognizable. But my daughter had called me Dad. And somehow, in the wreckage of everything else, that word made it possible to believe I could build something new. Not the family I'd lost, not the father I should have been, but maybe the father I could still become, starting now, starting late, starting with a daughter who decided to give me a second chance I didn't deserve. I drove home through Houston traffic with her text still on my screen, the word Dad, glowing in the darkness like a promise I had the rest of my life to keep. 6 months after the verdict, my hand reached for the drawer out of habit, but this time the badge stayed home. Monday morning, October. Coffee brewing in the kitchen. The same routine I'd followed for 20 years, except now everything was different. I opened the desk drawer where the badge had lived beside old business cards and paper clips. Picked it up, felt the familiar weight of brass in my palm. The engraving on the back worn smooth from decades of handling MEG February 12, 2000. For 20 years this badge had gone everywhere with me. Briefcase, pocket, glove compartment, a talisman, a promise, a question that had no answer. Now it had an answer. I set it down on the desk beside my coffee cup. Not hidden, not discarded. Just there. Resting. My phone buzzed. Margot. Still good for Saturday, found a place with actual good coffee. I smiled, typed back immediately. Wouldn't miss it. 3 dots appeared. Bringing the contracts I mentioned. Need your security perspective. Happy to help. Thanks, Dad. 6 months, and the words still hit different every time. Not the sharp crack of transformation anymore, something steadier now. Earned through showing up, listening more than talking, learning to be the father she needed now instead of grieving the one I should have been then. I looked at the badge on my desk, whispered to it what I'd never said aloud. You can rest now. The coffee had cooled while I sat thinking. I took a sip anyway, let my mind drift to what I'd learned in 32 years of searching and 6 months of finding. I'd spent a career finding system vulnerabilities, expert at applying that analytical lens to everything except my own family. For 20 years, I'd known something was wrong. Felt it in Orion's careful distance in Donovan's reports that were always thorough and always empty. Known it and chosen not to look deeper because looking meant confronting something I wasn't ready to see. I'd taught myself not to ask the questions that mattered. Called it trust. Called it respecting boundaries. But silence isn't neutral. It takes up as much room as the truth. It makes decisions by refusing to make them. It keeps things in shadow not through evil but through the exhausting work of not looking directly at what you already know is there. Coffee steam rises, dissipates. Some things you can't hold on to no matter how tight you grip. Orion was serving 12 years in federal prison. The son I'd raised from 8, now someone I didn't recognize, maybe had never truly known. And Margot. Saturday coffee meetings that stretched to 2 hours. Phone calls about work that drifted into talking about nothing important. Her asking my opinion, me learning when to give advice and when to just listen. Building something fragile and real from pieces scattered for 32 years. Last month, she'd mentioned her adoptive parents wanted to meet me. Said it carefully, testing whether I'd feel threatened. I'd said I'd be honored. Meant it. The people who'd loved her when I couldn't deserved my gratitude. 20 years of carrying a badge and asking a question that had no answer. 6 months of learning what it means to be present instead of searching. 20 years gone, but 20 years ahead are mine to decide. I finished my coffee, stood, gathered my briefcase and keys. Headed toward the door, then stopped. Looked back at my desk. The badge still there beside the empty cup, catching morning light through the window. For the first time in 20 years, I walked out of my house without it. Didn't feel like abandoning a child. Didn't feel like giving up. Felt like the question it represented finally had an answer. Not carrying you doesn't mean forgetting. It means finding. The badge asked a question for 20 years. Now it can just be a badge. Car door closes with the same sound it always has. Everything different, everything the same. I drove through Houston morning traffic. Monday commute coffee shops opening, construction crews starting work, the ordinary rhythm of a city moving forward. No one passing me on the highway knew anything had changed. No one could tell by looking that the man in the gray sedan had spent 32 years searching for a daughter, 6 months learning to be her father, and this morning had finally stopped carrying the weight of a question that had been answered. Families aren't only made at the beginning. Sometimes they're remade slowly, deliberately, by two people with identical badges, deciding the past isn't the final word on what comes next. I'd lost 20 years with Margot. Lost the chance to teach her to ride a bike, help with homework, walk her to her first day of school. Lost birthday parties and teenage arguments and the 1,000 small moments that build a parent-child relationship. I couldn't get those back. Couldn't reclaim what had been stolen by lies and silence, and my own refusal to look at what I knew was there. But I had Saturday coffee meetings, phone calls about contract analysis, her voice saying, "Thanks, Dad," in casual text messages. The slow, deliberate work of building trust with someone who had every reason not to trust me. I had 20 years ahead if I was lucky, maybe more, maybe less. And I had the choice to keep choosing to show up. Listen, be present, earn the title she'd given me, not because of biology, but because I was learning slowly to deserve it. The badge stays on the desk, beside an empty coffee cup. Margot's next text will come Wednesday or Thursday, her pattern for checking in midweek. Saturday, we'll drink overpriced coffee and talk about work, and carefully build the relationship neither of us knows how to name yet. Houston traffic moves around me like it always has. I drive forward into an ordinary morning. And for the first time in 32 years, that's enough. And to you, listening to my story, remember this. I spent 32 years carrying a badge in my pocket, asking a question that had an answer I was too afraid to see. I was an expert at finding other people's vulnerabilities, but refused to look at my own family with that same scrutiny. Don't make my mistake. Don't mistake silence for peace. Don't confuse comfortable lies with protecting the people you love. The questions that scare you most are usually the ones that need asking. Families aren't perfect, and sometimes the people closest to us carry secrets that reshape everything we thought we knew. But it's never too late to choose truth over comfort, to rebuild what was broken, even 32 years too late. I believe God put me through this for a reason, not just to find my daughter, but to understand that real family isn't built at the beginning. It's built through every choice we make after the truth comes out. These grandpa stories we tell aren't just about what happened. They're about what we do with what we learn. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Drop a comment and tell me what you would have done in my position. If this story meant something to you, please share it with someone who needs to hear it. And if you want more grandpa stories like this one, stories about family truth and second chances, subscribe to this channel and turn on notifications so you never miss one. Thank you for staying until the very end and letting me share this part of my life with you. Before you go, I want you to know that while the heart of this story is true, some details have been adjusted for storytelling purposes. What matters is the lesson we can all take from it.